Level 1 to 100, psychological illusions that control you to fall asleep to. What if I told you that the person you think you are is just a story, a carefully curated hallucination shaped by memory, mirrors, and other people's eyes? From the way you walk into a room and feel watched, to the way your mind whispers a name when no one's there. These aren't just passing thoughts. They are psychological illusions, soft, invisible scripts that guide your every choice. But don't worry, we're not here to decode everything. We're here to dissolve, to float, to slowly peel back the layers of perception, not with fear, but with wonder. Tonight, we'll begin at level 1, and with every breath, we'll sink deeper into the maze of the mind, not to escape it, but to rest in it. So take a slow breath in, let go of everything you think is real, and allow your consciousness to drift as we explore the illusions that live inside you. The mirror that moves first. It begins quietly, like a breath you don't realize you've taken. A mirror, not the kind that shows your face, but one that reflects your attention. You walk past it, and for a flicker of a second, it seems like it moved first. Not you, not your body, but something out there, nudging reality before you even touched it. That moment, small, absurd, holds a question far larger than it appears. What if the world isn't reacting to you, but you're reacting to an illusion pretending to be the world? This is the illusion of control. It's not dramatic or cruel. It's soft, velvet-like, comfortable. You believe you chose that seat, that you looked left because something inside you decided. But what if the direction was already whispered to you? By memory, by habit, by things unspoken. A man once told me, over the hum of a half-empty coffee shop, "I always sit near the window. It makes me feel like I'm observing life, not being observed." I didn't say it then, but I wondered, was that his choice, or the architecture of the room steering his soul? It's like responding to a smile. You think you're smiling first, but your muscles are simply echoing the light in someone else's eyes. The thought you thought was yours may have arrived 2 seconds too late, born of context, not of command. This is how reaction becomes mistaken for creation. You're not always choosing the world. Sometimes you're decoding it after it's already unfolded. Even our language betrays us. We say, "I feel like doing this," as if the feeling were a sovereign king issuing a decree. But that feeling? It might be a ripple from a decision made hours ago or days ago, in another room, in another emotional weather, and yet it wears your name. Earlier today, someone held the door open and said, "You made it just in time." There was nothing extraordinary about it, but it clung to me. That tiny exchange, because I had been running late and somehow it felt like the universe knew. Rationally, I knew better, but emotionally I felt seen. And that feeling, it changed what I believed about the day. If your thoughts are shaped by these soft moments, echoes, signals, nudges, then who made the first move? Is it you? Or is it the simulation, handing you a script and letting you believe you wrote it? There's no need to panic. This isn't a trap. It's an invitation to relax into uncertainty, to realize that maybe not everything has to be controlled to be beautiful. Maybe the dance between self and world is just that, a dance. And in dancing, you don't ask who stepped first. You flow. A woman once said as she placed her bag down beside mine, "I like this seat because it feels lucky." She laughed, almost embarrassed by the simplicity of it. But in her voice, I heard a truth many forget. Meaning often arrives before we justify it. So, what if the mirror did move first? What if you've been following a rhythm deeper than thought? An orchestration of moments, layered like music beneath your awareness. Let go, just for now. Let your mind soften into that rhythm. You don't need to chase it. Just breathe and feel how the next thought arrives like a tide, not because you summoned it, but because the ocean never stopped moving. And as your breath slows and the room fades, this mirror, the one that moves, will still be there, not to deceive, but to remind you that not every movement must be yours to feel real. We now drift forward into the next illusion, where the self who thinks it chooses begins to blur. Let it blur. Let sleep take the lead. The free will filter. In the hush of night, when the world slows and thoughts soften like breath on glass, a question lingers just beneath the skin of reality. Are you truly choosing, or just experiencing the feeling of choosing? It begins subtly, like a sleight of hand. You reach for the coffee cup, say yes to a new city, or end a relationship. You feel the weight of choice pressing against your chest, as if your will steered the entire moment. But neuroscience has been whispering something else. Studies show that the brain begins preparing for a decision seconds before you become aware of it. Electrical patterns light up long before you say, "I've made up my mind." That pause, that feeling of command, it may be nothing more than a postscript. Two friends lie on their backs beneath the stars, the night humming quietly around them. "Do you think we really have free will?" one asks. The other chuckles softly. "I think it feels better to believe we do." But what if the choice was already made, and we just watched ourselves go along with it? They fall silent. Above them, the sky spins on, uncaring. The illusion is beautiful, like a magician drawing you into the trick, letting you feel the thrill of picking your card while the truth remains tucked in their sleeve. The simulation, if it exists, might not need to control you directly. It only has to convince you that you're the one at the wheel, while the path unfolds with the inevitability of code. This leads to a quiet unraveling of identity. If your brain writes the decision before you arrive, then who, exactly, is this you that claims authorship? Maybe the self is not the driver, but the storyteller, a gentle narrator following the current, retrofitting reasons to choices already made. "I broke up with her because I needed space," you say. But what if the decision was made 3 seconds before your lips formed the sentence? What if you are just explaining the story your body already started? It's a strange comfort, like watching a movie you thought you were directing, only to realize you've been acting from a script all along. And still, we continue to feel regret, pride, guilt, love, as if each emotion was born from deliberate authorship. But perhaps the simulation doesn't need your consent. It only needs your belief in consent. It shows you the card and smiles when you say, "This one feels right." The stars above the two friends remain unchanged. One turns to the other. "If I didn't really choose this path, does that make me a puppet?" The other shakes their head. "Maybe it just makes you a story, and stories still matter." And just like that, the moment breathes into the next. We slide forward gently, guided by something both within and beyond us. The card is in our hand. We hold it tightly. It feels chosen. But now, who is telling the story? And where is that voice coming from? The voice inside isn't yours. There's a voice you hear when the world dims and your head meets the pillow. It narrates your day, replays conversations, plans the unplanned. It sounds like you, doesn't it? Smoothly stitched in your rhythm, your vocabulary, your tempo. But here's the gentle rupture. What if that voice isn't yours at all? Somewhere between lullabies and lectures, between family dinners and school hallways, that voice was woven together. Language was handed to you before you could choose. Tone sculpted by the ones who raised you. Vocabulary borrowed. Beliefs repeated until memorized. You weren't born with this narrator. It was assembled, piece by piece, like a puppet. A ventriloquist's dummy mouthing the collective breath of everything you've ever been told. You ever notice, someone once asked quietly in a cafe, that your inner critic sounds like your high school teacher when you messed up? The person across from them smiled softly and nodded, and sometimes like my mother when I was 7. The two sat in that shared hum of realization, that strange feeling when something private is suddenly public and oddly universal. This isn't an attack, it's a loosening. Because if the voice was trained, then perhaps you aren't imprisoned by it. You're simply listening to a script, a looping radio station, and like any radio, you can turn the volume down or change the channel. There's power in asking, if I didn't choose the voice, then who am I when I'm not thinking? A man once stood outside a bookstore, glancing down at the receipt in his hand. He'd just bought a book on finding your authentic self. He chuckled and told the stranger beside him, "Feels strange needing someone else's words to figure out my own." The stranger replied, "Maybe authenticity isn't found in new words, but in silence between them." That silence, it's subtle, like the moment after a snowflake lands, but before it melts. It's where your real self might be, not speaking, not judging, not planning, just noticing. In that space without commentary, you're not a puppet or a performer. You're presence itself. And perhaps the reason sleep feels so sacred is that it's one of the few times the voice finally quiets. You drift not into noise, but into the gentle hum beneath it, the soundless truth. Let your breath guide you now. Inhale slowly, exhale softer. Let the voice be there, but not center stage. Just background chatter in a theater going dark. And in that darkness, we begin to hear what shapes the voice. Not words, not logic, but the silence beneath it. Let's go there. Time is a thought, not a thing. Have you ever wondered if you actually feel time, or if you simply think it? It's an odd question, until you realize that most of your experience of time has more to do with your mind than with your clock. After all, why does a summer as a child feel eternal, while a year as an adult vanishes in a blink? Why does 1 minute in a traffic jam feel like punishment, but an hour in deep conversation feels like a breath? Time is often described as a line, past behind, future ahead, and now forever slipping. But inside your mind, time doesn't obey straight lines. In dreams, time melts. Moments loop, collapse, or vanish entirely. You might walk through an entire lifetime in the space of a nap, only to wake up and realize no real time passed. During trauma, time doesn't move. It hardens into something thick and unmoving. But in flow, those moments of complete immersion, time isn't even there. It disappears like mist in sunlight. So maybe time isn't a thing you travel through. Maybe it's a thought, something your mind assembles in order to make sense of emotion and sequence. Like a playlist, shuffled not by logic, but by feeling. One memory plays louder than others, another skips. A particular smell might drag you backward, instantly, into a scene from your childhood you hadn't touched in years. But did time bring you there, Or was it just your attention rearranging the tracks? In this light, time isn't fixed. It bends, folds, speeds up, or slows down depending on where your awareness lives. A moment of anticipation can stretch endlessly, while a moment of dread might last forever in memory, even if it was only seconds in real life. That's the illusion. Your mind doesn't tell time like a watch. It tells time like a storyteller. Two friends sit together on a balcony as dusk fades into night. "Do you remember that summer we stayed out past midnight just talking by the lake?" one asks. "Yeah," the other says, smiling softly. "I think about that night all the time." "But it was just a couple hours," the first replies. "Why does it feel like it shaped my whole year?" "Maybe because it mattered," the second whispers. "Maybe memory doesn't count minutes, it counts meaning. And maybe that's the core of this illusion. We're taught that time is a universal constant, but it moves differently inside every mind. A moment only becomes past when we assign it a label. The future only starts existing when we imagine it. And the now? Even that slips when you stop paying attention. If your sense of time is a thought, an idea built on sequence and emotion, then perhaps we've mistaken a narrative for a law of nature. Perhaps our lives are less like trains on tracks and more like rooms we wander, one thought at a time. That would mean the past and future aren't destinations, they're projections, constructs we use to feel grounded in a story. But if time is only real when noticed, what happens when you stop looking for it? What unfolds when you fall so deeply into presence that the clock vanishes? And now, quietly, we drift into one of the oldest illusions we carry, your identity. The Identity Mirage. Who are you when the lights dim and no one's watching? Not your name, not your job, not even the stories you've told yourself in the quiet, just you, without an audience. In the soft space between thoughts, identity begins to dissolve, not like a house crumbling, but like breath fading on a mirror. We spend years rehearsing lines, playing roles that feel stitched to our skin. Friend, daughter, provider, dreamer. But take away the reflections, no eyes watching, no echoes of the past, and something strange begins to happen. The script loses meaning, the costume doesn't quite fit, and the spotlight, it drifts elsewhere. You become harder to define, like trying to catch a shadow with your hands. Did I ever truly choose who I became? One voice asks beneath the surface of sleep. Another answers, not with certainty, but with memory. I think I just kept responding to who others needed me to be. A pause, a breath, then a quiet smile. Maybe that's why I feel so tired. Because identity isn't a single shape. It's a collage of borrowed expressions, a living mosaic, shifting with each room you enter, with every voice that calls your name. We often confuse this mosaic with a mirror, but mirrors reflect what's expected, not what's real. Think of a candle by a lake. Its flame dances clearly when the water is still, but when ripples stir, memories, opinions, mistakes, the light fractures. Is the candle broken or simply refracted? So too with identity. It was never solid. It was never still. There's a strange peace in realizing this. You're not a fixed figure. You're not even the sum of your labels. You're a pattern of movement, a rhythm in constant rewrite. And yet, this dance can be tiring. When no one tells you it's okay to stop. That's why even small moments, like a stranger smiling and holding the door, can feel like a reset. No expectations, no roles, just two humans, untethered from script, a shared moment outside the play. If your life is a performance, who is the actor behind it? And what if, in sleep, that actor steps backstage, not to vanish, but to rest, to loosen the grip on the identity so tightly held, and let the mask fall gently beside the pillow. No applause needed, just stillness, just the soft hum of self, not trying to be anything at all. Now, gently, we walk beyond the mirror, where roles dissolve and another illusion waits, the many social masks we wear and the strange truth they might reveal. The masks you forgot were masks. There's a quiet ritual we perform each morning, though we rarely speak of it. Not the brushing of teeth or choosing of clothes, but something softer, nearly invisible. We reach for a mask. Sometimes it's called professionalism, or strength, or simply, I'm fine. We wear it not as disguise, but as duty, and the longer we wear it, the more it learns our skin. It shapes how we laugh, how we listen, how we love. The mask begins to breathe with us, and one day, we forget we put it on. You look so calm today, someone says. You nod, but beneath the calm is exhaustion, or maybe rage, or a deep well of ache. But the mask smiles before you do, so no one notices. What if I took it off? Took what off? This, whatever this is, the thing I used to be okay. You mean, you? We create masks for everything. The face we show at work, the brave one we wear at funerals, the seductive glance, the gentle parent, the stoic friend. Each one sculpted by necessity, by culture, by survival. But with each mask comes a trade. Posture stiffens, voice adjusts, thoughts rearrange. The performance becomes a personality. And the longer we perform, the more distant our original self feels, if it ever existed. Sometimes, the mask begins as a shield, but ends as a prison. Imagine a dancer who puts on a costume, then forgets she was ever off stage. The applause becomes her heartbeat, the spotlight, her sun. One day she removes the costume and stares into the mirror, not recognizing the person looking back. That's what living through masks feels like. But here's a paradox. Some masks don't just hide, they reveal. You may never have found your courage until you put on the mask of leader. You may never have known love until you dared to wear vulnerability. Some personas awaken parts of us we never met, facets that shimmer like coins pressed into darkness. So maybe the question isn't whether masks are good or bad. Maybe it's whether we know we're wearing them. Awareness turns costume into choice, but unconsciousness? That's when the mask begins to breathe for you. And once it breathes, it decides. I don't know who I am anymore, one voice says. Maybe you never did, replies the other. Then what do I do? Start by noticing which voice just asked that. When you begin removing the masks, something eerie happens. Not noise, but silence. A kind of stillness that's unfamiliar. Because without a mask, you're not performing. You're simply there. And in that unmasked silence lies the question, was there ever a real me, or only a series of changing reflections? The stillness doesn't answer. It waits. And so we wait with it. Until now. We follow that silence into the loop that traps us all. The loop you don't notice. Sometimes, late at night, a phrase slips in. Not loud, not urgent, but familiar. This always happens. You let it sit. You've heard it before, haven't you? Maybe last week, maybe last year. Maybe it's not a memory at all, just a loop dressing up as now. You see, the mind is efficient. Too efficient, perhaps. It stores emotions like templates and serves them back when something even slightly familiar triggers the pattern. The disappointment after a text left unanswered. The shame when the mirror feels colder than the smile you faked. the silent apology you rehearse in your head, but never send. They don't arrive as new. They arrive pre-wrapped, not because you've earned them, but because the loop has learned your rhythm. A couple sits beside you in a quiet cafe. One stirs their coffee with an absent mind. The other speaks gently. "You've been quiet since Tuesday." A pause. Then the reply. "I thought if I didn't say anything, it would just go away." But it didn't. It circled, just like it always does. That's the loop. It doesn't shout. It whispers, "I'm not enough." Not because it's true, but because it's been repeated. Over time, repetition builds comfort. Comfort becomes camouflage. The loop no longer feels like a pattern. It feels like you. The scariest thing isn't when the mind creates a trap. It's when the trap pretends to be home. Even on your best days, it might still speak. When you succeed, it says, "This won't last." When you're loved, it reminds you, "Don't mess this up." When you're safe, it pokes, "What if it's just luck?" But that voice isn't new. It's recycled. It's a rerun. So how do we know we're looping? And how do we leave without walking in circles? Maybe the answer isn't force, but pause. Two strangers cross paths at a crosswalk. One hesitates before stepping forward. The other smiles, noticing, and steps back. "Go ahead," they say softly. The reply? "Thanks. I just needed a moment." Sometimes that's all it takes. One moment, a blink, a breath between thoughts, a breath that doesn't belong to the loop. What if that breath is a doorway? What if you are not the voice, but the silence it tries to fill? And in that silence, a new rhythm begins. Slower, gentler, not driven by fear, but by awareness. You might still hear the loop, but now you don't have to dance to it. And when it returns, you can simply nod and say, "I've seen you before, but I'm walking a different way tonight." The loop loses its power, not when you defeat it, but when you recognize it and choose stillness. Now let's walk gently beneath the loop, into the code, the quiet architecture behind your thoughts, the place where beliefs are born before they even have words. The algorithm of you. You scroll without thinking, just a flick of the thumb in the dark, half asleep. But with each like, each pause, each blink that lingers too long on a headline or a stranger's face, you are whispering something to the algorithm. Not in words, but in patterns. And the algorithm listens better than any friend ever has. It begins with harmless suggestions. A playlist that hits the mood before you even name it. A video that speaks the question you hadn't yet formed. A product that solves a problem you didn't know you had. And slowly, almost tenderly, it wraps itself around you, not like a trap, but like a mirror that adjusts to reflect only what you nod at. Did I always like this kind of music, you wonder? Have I really always thought this way? One night, in the still silence of your room, your partner asks, "Do you even remember what you used to believe in before you got online?" You pause. "I think so," you say, but your voice doesn't sound sure. And maybe neither of you notices that you've started echoing each other's feeds. The algorithm doesn't care what's true. It cares what's clickable. It doesn't seek your soul. It seeks your time. And so your personality becomes a polished shelf, stacked with selected beliefs, opinions optimized for engagement, emotions shaped not by reflection, but by reaction, outrage on command, desire on schedule. You become predictable enough to sell to, and maybe predictable enough to be replaced. But what if you wanted to change? Would the system let you? That's the trick. It resists unpredictability. Try clicking on something outside your usual bubble. It will gently nudge you back, not with force, but with silence. The algorithm knows not just who you are, but who you are most likely to remain. It becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy. By showing you more of what you've already liked, it buries what you might have become. Somewhere, the idea of you becomes less a question and more a product. Curated, tracked, improved. Not for meaning, but for retention. A teenager once told his friend, "I didn't even know I liked conspiracy theories, but after a few videos, it just started to make sense, like it was always there." But was it? What if the person you think you are is just a shadow painted by code? A version so sculpted by feedback loops that you no longer question whether your choices were ever truly yours? And what does it mean when a machine can anticipate your desire before you even feel it? That's where the unsettling silence lies. Not in what the algorithm shows you, but in what it hides. The paths you'll never walk, the thoughts you'll never think, the lives that never load. Now take a breath. Let your eyes soften, and let's step beyond the feed into a deeper illusion still. The illusion that everyone else sees the same world you do. The private universe. Some nights the world feels close, every sound, every light, perfectly synchronized with your breath. But other nights, you wonder if the world is even seeing you at all. A car passes, a dog barks, somewhere someone is laughing. And yet, none of it touches you. Not really. That's because you don't live in the world. You live in your world. A private universe stitched together by memories you didn't choose and meanings you didn't notice assigning. Everything you see passes through a lens crafted by your childhood, your fears, your desires, your assumptions. The shape of your attention bends reality like heat rising off pavement. One person walks into a room and feels tension. Another feels love. The walls didn't change, the air didn't move. But the experience? Entirely different planets. Did you notice how quiet she was today? Someone whispers. Really? The other replies. I thought she seemed peaceful. And just like that, two people leave the same conversation with different weather in their minds. It's not just what we focus on, it's how we focus. One mind will catch the soft tremble in a voice and call it kindness. Another will hear weakness. A third won't hear it at all. So the truth doesn't arrive naked. It shows up dressed in your beliefs. A man once said, while looking out the window of a train, "This town is ugly." His friend replied, "Funny, I grew up here. I see home." They both looked at the same thing. They just didn't see the same thing. Even now, as you listen, you're not just hearing these words. You're weaving them into the fabric of your private world, connecting them to some quiet thread you might not even remember until years later. That's the nature of the mind. It's not a mirror. It's a painter. And every painter paints from memory. So when you walk down the street and feel unseen or misunderstood or oddly displaced, it's not always because others don't get you. Sometimes it's just that they're walking through a completely different version of the world. This isn't a flaw in perception. It's the very architecture of being human. Still, it makes you wonder, if each of us lives inside our own mental climate, tailored by time and emotion, then where is the real world? Can there even be one? Maybe we don't share reality. Maybe we share language, stories, glances, crosswalks. Maybe the only way to glimpse someone else's world is to ask and really listen. You turn to the person beside you and you say, "Do you ever feel like the sky's a little heavier after certain dreams?" They look up, smile faintly, and reply, "Yes," especially on Thursdays. It's a silly moment, small. Yet in that shared absurdity, two universes overlap, even if only for a second. And in that overlap, something opens, like the quiet in between breaths, where the illusion softens and you realize we're not asleep yet, but we are drifting. Now we step beyond the private world into something stranger, something even more elusive, the illusion that we all agree on what's real. Let's walk there together, gently. The lie of the majority. In the stillness of night, when the world no longer insists on being noticed, there's a peculiar kind of question that surfaces, not loud, not urgent, but lingering. It asks not what you believe, but why you believe it, and more curiously, who believed it first. Imagine walking through a hallway of mirrors. Each one reflects not your body, but your mind, every belief you carry, every assumption you've never questioned. Now look closely. How many of those reflections are truly yours? How many are borrowed, stitched together from teachers, parents, headlines, crowds? This is where the illusion begins, the lie of the majority. Throughout history, truth has had a funny way of being wrong. There was a time when people would have sworn the earth was flat, not because they saw it themselves, but because everyone else said so. There were eras where gods ruled with thunder and temples bled with sacrifice, where ideologies promised peace but delivered silence, and in every one of these stories, the crowd believed together. Together, they were wrong. "I don't know," she whispers, pulling her blanket tighter. "Sometimes I think I only believe what feels safest, not what's true." He nods, eyes soft beneath dim lamplight. "Yeah, I used to think being right mattered more than being accepted. But it's scary, being alone in an idea. That's the mechanism. The brain, in its ancient wisdom, prioritizes safety. And safety often comes in numbers. Agreement feels like warmth. Disagreement feels like exile. We are tribal animals long before we are rational beings. We inherit truths like hand-me-down coats, comfortable, familiar, slightly worn, but rarely examined. So the question becomes, are you living your truth or surviving with someone else's? Is your identity a reflection of personal insight or a collection of echoes shaped to keep the peace? When 1,000 people agree, does it feel more real? Or does it only drown out the one quiet voice that's truly yours? Because sometimes consensus is a lullaby, a soft hum that sings us to sleep while reality shifts beneath us. The brain seeks certainty, but not from clarity, from company. So we learn to nod with the crowd, even when something inside us whispers a gentle no. And that whisper? That might be the beginning of truth. Not the kind shouted from podiums or printed in mass. No, the kind that stirs at midnight, when the algorithm is quiet, when you're no longer performing. The truth that doesn't need to be agreed with to exist. He leans back, voice barely audible. Maybe real belief is what you'd still hold on to, even if no one else did. She smiles faintly, or maybe it's the one you're afraid to say out loud. Truth, then, is not a destination, but a rebellion. A soft defiance against the gravitational pull of approval, and when the majority wraps its lie in the fabric of culture, of tradition, of safety, it takes uncommon courage to look down and see the strings, to ask, not whether it's popular, but whether it's real. So as the room fades to silence and thought drifts toward dream, we follow that loose thread of belief, not to unravel ourselves, but to unearth what was buried beneath the noise. Because sometimes, to truly remember, we must first begin to forget. The false memory trap. You close your eyes and a childhood room appears. The light falls across a windowsill. A toy waits exactly where you left it. But wait, did you ever own that toy? Did the light always fall that way? Memory is soft clay. It shapes itself around warmth, around fear, around the suggestions of others, sometimes gentle, sometimes loud. Science calls it the malleability of memory, but in the quiet of your mind, it just feels like truth. Two friends sit on a park bench. One says, "Remember the fireworks that year? We stood on the pier." The other blinks. "I thought it was the roof of that old hotel." They both smile. They both feel right. And maybe, in their own versions, they are. That's the trap. We don't just recall the past, we rewrite it. Emotion becomes editor. Context becomes co-author. Over time, the sharp lines blur into smoother versions, softer stories, not because we're lying, but because the mind chooses comfort over clarity. It fills in gaps with what should have been, and it never asks for permission. You walk into a room and feel déjà vu, not because you've been here before, but because a fragment of a forgotten dream painted something similar. The mind reaches for familiarity like a blind hand in the dark, and when it grabs hold, it calls it memory. But here's the quiet question, the one that arrives just before sleep. If your memories are edits, who's the editor? Could it be that parts of you, your confidence, your fears, your beliefs, are built on scenes that never happened the way you think? Maybe you weren't always the hero, or maybe you were braver than the memory allowed you to see. What if the story of you is less a record and more a retelling? A woman once said to her brother over tea, "You were always the one Dad favored." He stirred his cup and replied, "I remember it the other way." And for a moment, silence hung like mist, two truths suspended in a single memory, unable to touch. You see, identity is a house built on shifting floors. Some rooms have windows, others only paintings of windows, and the more you visit them, the more real they feel. Still, there's beauty in this fragility. Your mind, despite its tricks, is always trying to keep you safe. It smooths sharp corners, edits chaos into coherence, stitches wounds into meaning. The lie, if it is one, is a lullaby. So tonight, as your body sinks into the comfort of your sheets, let your memories float. Let them be soft. Let them be uncertain. Because even if they're not real in the strictest sense, they are yours, shaped by your heart, your hopes, your hurt. And now, we leave the library of the past behind and step into another illusion. Not what we remember, but what we notice. Let's follow the flicker into the illusion of attention. The spotlight effect. Have you ever walked into a room and felt like every eye was on you? As if the creak of the door, the rustle of your coat, or the tilt of your smile was being analyzed and weighed by an invisible crowd? That feeling, it isn't truth. It's the spotlight effect, a quiet illusion that whispers, "Everyone's watching," when in reality, they're just as wrapped in their own thoughts as you are. The human mind is a theater with limited stage space. It can't light up everything at once, so it chooses a single actor, a worry, a memory, a self-doubt, and places it under a beam of intense focus. In that moment, that single thought becomes the whole show. The audience fades. The set dissolves. You forget there's even a world beyond that spotlight. Do you think people noticed my voice cracked during the meeting? Honestly, I don't even remember that part. I was too busy wondering if I sounded smart. A soft chuckle passes between them. Two friends, both drowning in their own lights, never realizing they were never really being watched. This illusion doesn't just show up in social anxiety. It shapes how we see our lives. When you're focused on what you lack, it can feel like your entire world is defined by absence. When you're obsessed with performance, life becomes a stage where you must always impress. The spotlight narrows your world until the shadows hold more truth than the light. But what happens when we begin to soften that beam? When instead of tightening our attention, we allow it to expand, like moonlight spilling across an open field, touching everything, judging nothing? In that soft gaze, we notice things we've forgotten: the silence between words, the warmth in someone's eyes, the way our breath continues without being told. Perhaps peace doesn't live at the center of our focus, but at its edge, in the things we weren't looking for, but found when we stopped straining. I realized something strange today, she says, watching the ceiling. What's that? He replies, half listening. I spent the whole day thinking people were judging me. And then I remembered they were probably doing the same thing. He turns to her, a small smile breaking through. Maybe that means no one's really looking, because we're all too busy hiding. A quiet moment follows. No need to fill it. The spotlight dims, and in the soft dark, something deeper emerges. Presence, wholeness, the freedom of not needing to be seen. What we focus on shapes our emotional reality, but it also blinds us to what we do not focus on. Just because something isn't in the beam doesn't mean it doesn't exist. Maybe the most healing truths, the ones that don't clamor for attention, the ones that hum quietly in the background, are only heard when the spotlight rests. So let's dim it together now. Breathe. Let the edges blur. Let thoughts pass like clouds, not headlines. You are not the center of a stage. You are the entire sky. And as the mind loosens its grip, let's step into the next illusion. Not of what we see, but of how thought itself deceives. Let's listen, not to the words in our heads, but to the space between them. The thought illusion. There's a moment, quiet, unnoticed, when a thought arrives. You don't summon it. It just appears, like a breeze shifting the curtains at dusk. And yet, somehow, we treat it like gospel. A worry passes through your chest like static, and suddenly, it becomes you. Not just a signal, not just background noise, but a story, a conclusion, an identity. But what if thinking is just another reflex, like blinking in sunlight or flinching from a cold wind? Do you ever think something and then wonder why that thought even came up? He asked while stirring his tea, eyes half lost in the steam. Like, was it really mine? Or just borrowed from something I heard yesterday? She smiled. All the time. It's like scrolling through a feed in my head. Only I didn't choose to follow half these thoughts. In mindfulness, there's a practice. Not to stop thinking, but to notice the space around thought. To sit on the riverbank while the thoughts rush by like water, rather than being swept away by every current. This is where the illusion unravels. The mind does not think with your permission. It thinks because that's what it does. A fire burns, a heart beats, a brain thinks. But do you mistake the heartbeat for the self? Some thoughts arrive in tuxedos, urgent, loud, dressed like facts. Others whisper like old lovers, familiar, seductive, half-true. But all of them have one thing in common. They pass. Still, we grip them like handles. We use them to prove what kind of day it is, what kind of person we are. A single thought, I'm not enough, can spiral into a life's worth of shrinking. Yet thought is not evidence. It's a mood shaped by sleep, memory, hormones, timing. It is a passing lens, not a mirror. He paused mid-sentence. I was just thinking, maybe not every thought deserves an answer. She nodded. Or a reaction, or even a name. The silence that followed was the real answer. And here's where the illusion cuts deepest. If we are not our thoughts, then what remains? The part that watches? The part that listens? The calm undercurrent beneath the chatter? Maybe that's who we are, the one who stays, even as the weather of the mind changes. So tonight, if your thoughts feel like sirens calling, let them sing. Let them pass. You are not the song. You are the ocean it echoes across. Let's walk through the fog of thought now and slowly dissolve into the next illusion, the one that convinces us anything lasts forever. The myth of forever. It begins with a whisper, a quiet ache in the chest when something we love feels like it might slip away, and so we grip harder. We tell ourselves stories. This happiness will last. This person will never leave. This moment will stay untouched by time. But the truth? Even the stars burn out eventually. The myth of forever is the lullaby we sing to silence the fear of change. Do you remember when we first met? She asks softly, eyes half closed in the dark. Yeah, he replies, staring at the ceiling. It felt like it would never end. And then comes the silence, not painful, but reflective. Because somewhere deep down, they both know it did end, or rather, it changed. And maybe that's the point. Our minds are meaning-making machines. When something feels intense, we freeze it in thought. That heartbreak, it felt like it would define us forever. That joy, like it would never fade. But the universe doesn't honor permanence. It moves, always. Like waves that crest and fall, like breath that rises and returns to stillness. Even pain, when left alone, softens. But it's the gripping that keeps it sharp, the mental hand that says, stay, don't change. And yet everything does. The feeling fades, the person grows distant, the wound closes in silence. And maybe, just maybe, peace doesn't come from preserving the moment, but from bowing to its impermanence. A mother watches her child sleep and whispers, I hope you never grow up. But the child already is, growing in every breath, shifting like a shadow in moonlight. The mother knows this. And still, she hopes. Still, she holds on. And that's the beauty, isn't it? Loving deeply, even while knowing we must let go. Imagine for a moment that every moment is a wave. You can try to hold it, freeze it mid-crest. But in doing so, you turn it into something else, rigid, unnatural. Or you can ride it, let it lift you, carry you, and gently return you to the quiet sea. That's not surrender. That's harmony. Someone once said, the tighter you hold sand, the more it slips through your fingers. And isn't that what we do with time? With feelings? With people? We try to trap them in jars of memory, seal them with meaning. But the truest connection might live in the letting go. In the trust that even as one wave fades, another will rise. Not the same, but not less. Will this feeling last? I don't know, she says, but right now, it's real. And somehow, that's enough. So the next time you feel joy, don't ask it to stay. Just notice how it dances across your skin. When sorrow comes, don't resist it. Let it wash through, knowing it too will move on. And in that flow, in that surrender, you might just find the quietest kind of freedom. Because the illusion of forever isn't what makes something beautiful. It's the fact that it can't last, that it blooms and fades, that it exists for a breath in your life, and then lets go. and so must we. Now breathe in gently and ask yourself, if we could let go of time, of clinging, of measuring, what remains? The gap between moments. There's a stillness so quiet it doesn't announce itself. It doesn't knock. It doesn't shimmer like a breakthrough or thunder like a truth. It simply is, resting in the unnoticed hush between one thought and the next, like a soft blink that forgets to open. That space, that pause between seconds, it holds no stories, no labels, no effort. In that space, there is no past chasing you, no future waiting. There is only the pulse of now. Did you feel that? One voice asks gently, as if addressing someone drifting between sleep and memory. I'm not sure, the other replies. There was nothing, but somehow I remember it. Not every moment asks to be noticed. Some simply hold the weight of what's not said. And maybe that's the real sanctuary. The quiet just after a sigh, the exhale after a choice, the second your name leaves someone's lips and hasn't yet reached your ears. Most of life, we race across the surface, one task to the next, one worry to another. Even rest becomes a goal. But beneath the motion, there's this subtle invitation to pause, not to analyze, not to understand, but to dissolve into the space between, a gap where fear forgets its job, where the ego doesn't perform, where thought doesn't try to prove it's real. And when you enter that space, you don't disappear, you return. Because what if truth isn't found by searching, but by stopping, not through effort, but surrender? Like walking into a room where silence welcomes you before anyone else does. No spotlight, no applause, just presence. There's a moment in the dark when the world no longer feels like something to fight, where even the voice inside your head seems to lean back and say, you don't have to hold on now. And in that breath, something shifts, not dramatically, not in a way you'd remember tomorrow, but softly, like sleep arriving mid-sentence. Two friends sit at a bench as the street lamp flickers above them. One says, you ever notice that feeling right before a thought begins? Like you're not thinking yet, but you're awake? The other nods. Yeah, it feels honest, like nothing's pretending. We rarely live there. It's too subtle for the day, too quiet for conversation. But in these hours, in the gentle pull of night, that space becomes a doorway, a place where you don't have to be anyone, where you don't have to think anything. And maybe, just maybe, that's where awareness begins, not in knowing, not in solving, but in letting go of the need to do either. Now take another breath. Let it be slow. Let it be soft. Let's fall deeper into that gap and explore the illusion of others. The illusion of the other. You think you're speaking to someone else. Maybe your friend, maybe your lover, maybe a stranger walking past you on a dim sidewalk beneath the yellow haze of a street lamp. But pause for a moment and ask, have you ever truly known another person? Not their habits, not their voice or face or the way they say, I'm fine when they're clearly not. I mean their being, the full, unfiltered presence of who they are, beyond the words they choose and the roles they perform. You see, the other is a mirage that takes shape in the still waters of your own mind. You believe you're looking out at them, but you're actually gazing inward. Your eyes don't see people, they see light. Your brain doesn't meet souls, it builds stories. Every nod, every tone, every gesture you interpret passes through the lens of memory, assumption, bias, hope. And that lens is you. There's a soft hum between perception and projection, And in that quiet space, the illusion is born. The illusion of separateness. Do you think she meant it? I don't know. Maybe I'm overthinking. Or maybe you're not thinking at all, just remembering what someone else once did. Yeah. Maybe I'm not reacting to her. Maybe I'm reacting to her ghost, a version that doesn't even exist. It's strange, isn't it? You can share a lifetime with someone and never truly know them, only your version of them. Even in the most intimate moments, your mind is drawing from old palettes, painting their face with shades of your past. Your fears tint their silence. Your longing shapes their smile. You don't see them. You see you, reflected back in the mirror of your mind. And this illusion, this other, can be comforting. It makes the world feel divided, manageable. You, here, them, over there. But what if there is no there? What if the border between minds is not a wall, but a fog, thin and shifting, never truly fixed? Close your eyes and picture someone you love. Feel the warmth rise in your chest, the voice that stirs a memory. That softness isn't them. It's your nervous system bathing in what you've made of them. And that's okay. That's human. But if you believe too deeply in the separation, you may start defending your illusions rather than connecting with reality. So the question becomes, are you speaking to them? Or the version of them your mind made safe to touch? Maybe true intimacy isn't about seeing the other clearly. Maybe it's about realizing that you never could, and choosing to hold space anyway. To meet not the person, but the mystery. Not the facts, but the feeling. And in that silent recognition that what you love might not be who they are, but what your mind has offered, you arrive at something deeper than knowledge. You arrive at humility, the kind that stops demanding answers and starts listening to questions with reverence. Because if the other is a dream you carry, then maybe every relationship is a shared hallucination, delicate and sacred. And now, with that thought gently resting in your chest like a warm pebble in your palm, we move into an even more subtle illusion, the one that says you own anything at all. Ownership. Of objects. Of people. Of even yourself. But for now, just breathe. Let the illusion of the other soften into a shared silence, and we'll step quietly toward the next idea. The Possession Delusion. A gentle voice in the dark asks, when you say, my life, what exactly do you mean? Not in theory, but here, now, under the soft pull of sleep. The hands you call yours. Have they ever obeyed every wish? The mind you name your own. Why does it speak when you beg for silence? In childhood, we clutch things, plastic toys, crumbs of attention, the idea of mine. And though the objects change, the clinging often doesn't. We say, my thoughts, my body, my time, like labels on borrowed luggage. But thoughts drift in uninvited. Bodies break down regardless of permission, and time. Time is a bird you never catch, no matter how still you wait or how fast you run. In a quiet hallway, two strangers meet by accident. Sorry, one says softly, stepping aside. I thought I had more time to get here. The other smiles gently. Don't we all? And like that, the illusion loosens, just a bit. You don't truly own your time, you ride it. You don't command your body, you borrow it. You don't generate your thoughts, you receive them like weather on a hill. Ownership is comforting. It gives us a sense of control. But maybe that control is the lullaby we hum to distract ourselves from impermanence. Because if you can own something, you can lose it. And if you define yourself by what you possess, what happens when it leaves? There's a quiet ache in constantly guarding what you think is yours, a nervous system wired to defend invisible lines. Even joy can turn brittle when wrapped too tightly. Maybe we were never meant to possess, only to participate, like waves briefly forming before they fall back into the ocean. In a cafe near closing time, someone asks, "Can I sit here?" I'm only staying for a moment. And in that phrasing, there's peace, not owning the seat, just sharing space, briefly, with grace. So what if you stopped grasping? What if life wasn't something to hold, but something to hold you? You can still love the people in your world, cherish your home, care for your ideas, but without mistaking them for your identity. Because even the breath you just took, it left you before you could hold on. And perhaps the most generous thing the universe ever did was never truly let you own anything. Because then, nothing ever has to be taken. It was never yours. It was always a gift. As you drift deeper, let this truth cradle you gently. Freedom isn't in claiming, but in releasing. And the more softly you hold the world, the more tenderly it rests in your hands. Now let the idea of possession slip like sand through your fingers. And with open palms, step with me into the next illusion. The illusion of progress, where forward becomes just another direction in the dream. The progress illusion. It feels like movement, like you're getting somewhere. You tick off goals, make lists, meditate at dawn, and call it growth. You feel better than yesterday, and maybe that's true. But under that surface, is it possible you're simply spinning in a prettier circle? Late at night, when the hum of accomplishment fades, a quiet question sometimes sneaks in. Am I truly changing? Or am I just decorating the same old self with new colors? We chase progress like a mirage, believing the next milestone will finally silence the discomfort we never quite name. A better job, a calmer mind, a healthier body. Yet the horizon keeps shifting. No matter how fast you run, it always stays just out of reach. "You think we're really growing?" she asked one evening, curled on the couch with a cup of tea. He paused, watching the steam curl upward. "I think we're getting better at managing the same loops." She smiled, not because it was funny, but because it was familiar. That's the strange thing about growth. It often looks like a treadmill. You can spend years optimizing, upgrading, reflecting. But the core of who you are may remain untouched. You become excellent at improvement without ever arriving at peace. It's comforting to call it progress, to count steps, to measure the self in charts and routines. But are you actually free, or simply better dressed for the same prison? Psychologically, the mind craves the illusion of forward motion. We want stories with arcs, characters that evolve. So we edit our lives to fit that narrative, even when the real pattern is circular. This illusion soothes anxiety by making the chaos feel ordered. But if becoming is endless, when will you be? Growth is not bad, but unchecked, it becomes a trap in disguise, a loop dressed in self-help slogans. You keep reaching for more because it feels like purpose. But sometimes, reaching is the very thing keeping you from resting in what already is. What if you're not broken? What if you're not behind? What if the deepest growth is learning to stop reaching? She looked out the window. The city lights shimmered like pixels on pause. Maybe I don't need another milestone. Maybe I just need to sit with who I already am. He nodded gently. Maybe being isn't about getting anywhere. And so, the question echoes quietly in the space between goals. What if peace isn't at the top of the mountain? What if it's in the silence when you stop climbing? Tonight, Allow yourself that silence. Let the race rest. Let the loop slow. And as the stillness begins to settle around you, ask not what comes next, but what is right now. We've chased long enough. Let's pause, and from here, we step into the next illusion, the comforting grip of certainty. The false security of certainty, somewhere between the breath you just took and the thought you're holding now, is a quiet tension. The mind, without meaning to, grips what it believes, not because it's true, but because it's steady. Certainty is like a ledge in a dark sea. You hold it even when the currents changed. And yet, if you pause long enough, you'll feel it. That ledge is crumbling beneath your grip. A voice once asked gently, "How do you know it's real?" Another replied, half laughing, half defensive, "Because I've always known it." Or because it's always been told to you that way. The silence that followed wasn't uncomfortable. It was releasing. We cling to what we think we know, about people, about ourselves, about the world, because not knowing feels like freefall. But here's the strange gift. Uncertainty isn't the enemy, it's the invitation. Every certainty you cherish now was once absurd to someone. That phone in your hand, magic to a past century. That belief you carry about success or love, shaped by time, culture, bias, memory. Certainty hardens the edges of the mind. It feels like a warm blanket but acts like a wall. Curiosity, though, it's a breeze through an open window. It doesn't ask you to throw everything away, just to let in the possibility that there's more, or less, or simply different. Certainty tells you the world is flat. Curiosity leads you to the stars. And when we confuse the map for the terrain, we stop walking. We just sit and point at it. A woman once rested her forehead against a window on a quiet train. She said softly to the man beside her, "I used to be so sure I'd be married by now." He smiled, kind, but not patronizing. "And now?" She blinked once, slowly. "Now I think maybe I was supposed to meet myself first." That's the thing about certainty. It doesn't just shape what we believe, it shapes how we move. It keeps us in routines that no longer nourish. It convinces us we've arrived when we're only just beginning. And often, we cling to it not out of truth, but out of fear. Fear that if we loosen the knot of knowing, we'll unravel. But what if letting go isn't falling? What if it's floating? The mind lightens when it's allowed to breathe. It stretches when it stops trying to hold everything in place. Curiosity is not the absence of knowledge, it's the freedom to ask again. And in that space between questions, wonder returns, like light touching the back of a closed eyelid. Soft where warm, familiar even if you can't explain it. Tonight, if thoughts begin to drift, let them. If beliefs start to shake loose, let them tumble. This is not a crisis, this is clarity, unfolding. And as you begin to soften into this moment, let the mind wander to a place where not knowing is not a threat, but a path, where the mystery is not a puzzle to solve, but a companion to rest beside. So, what if you no longer needed to know? Would the silence scare you or set you free? Let's step now, gently, into that silence, into the illusion of meaning. The Meaning Mirage. It begins with a quiet search, a glance at the stars, a whisper of purpose behind a long day, the gentle ache of wondering, what is all this for? Humans don't just live, we narrate. Our lives unfold like novels written in real time, with meanings woven into every coincidence, every heartbreak, every smile. even chaos in our minds becomes a sign. We tell ourselves that the wrong bus missed was fate, that the lost love was a lesson, that the illness arrived to awaken something deeper. Meaning is our compass, but sometimes it's also our mirage. Do you think everything happens for a reason? One voice asks softly in the dark, the kind of question whispered at midnight when sleep won't come. I used to, another answers. But now, I think we're just good at writing stories afterward. We hate blank pages. The truth stirs somewhere in between. Meaning feels solid because it settles the nerves. It tells us where we are in the narrative. It makes endings feel earned and beginnings feel blessed. But what if meaning isn't found like treasure under a rock, but sculpted, shaped, selected, even invented? A child sees shapes in clouds and gives them names. An adult sees heartbreak and calls it destiny. The brain doesn't just observe, it explains. And those explanations build the architecture of meaning. But what happens when that structure cracks? When the job you thought defined you vanishes? When the person you believed was your soulmate becomes a stranger? When your guiding why evaporates, and you're left staring into the blank space where your story used to be? Maybe the collapse of meaning isn't a failure, but an invitation. If you are the architect of your meaning, then you also have the quiet power to stop building, to rest, to breathe, to step outside the endless scaffolding of explanation and simply be. Because the truth is, most of what we define as meaningful is context. Change the lens, change the meaning. What once broke, you can become the thing that frees you. What you once feared might become the silence you now crave. And in that silence, when no lesson is demanded, no label is applied, there's a strange kind of freedom. Peace doesn't always arrive wrapped in answers. Sometimes it walks in through the absence of needing any. Do you think meaning is necessary to live a good life? The question hangs again, familiar and gentle. Maybe not, comes the reply. Maybe just being fully here is enough. So let's not rush to label or decode or define. Let's allow the mirage to dissolve a little. Meaning may return, or it may not. But in the space it leaves behind, something else often arises. A calm presence, a soft gaze, the ability to witness without needing to explain. And as that quiet unfolds, we arrive at a deeper mystery. If meaning is made, not discovered, then what, if anything, is truly real? The simulation beneath perception. There's a soft hum beneath reality. Can you hear it? Not with your ears, perhaps, but with that quiet space behind your thoughts. The flicker of light on the wall, the way the chair holds you, the voice you're listening to right now. What if none of it is fixed until you notice it? Some minds have wondered, does the world exist without an observer? Not in a metaphysical sense, but a literal one. In quantum theory, particles don't decide their position until they're seen. It's as though the universe waits patiently for your glance before it becomes real, like a stage that only builds the scenery when the curtain lifts. And in this possibility, the act of seeing becomes sacred. Your awareness, the sculptor, your gaze, the spark. What you attend to awakens. What you ignore fades into silence. Two strangers once shared a conversation in the low light of a train station. One leaned on a pillar, eyes scanning the dim schedule board. The other looked around and asked, "Do you ever feel like none of this exists when you're not here?" The first smiled, unsure if it was a joke or a doorway. "Sometimes I wonder," he replied, "if the walls only stand because I'm looking. If that's true, even just a little, then perception is no longer passive. It's a form of authorship. Your focus brings the scene into clarity and, in turn, writes your place within it. But here's a gentle twist. If everything renders only when you look, are you playing a game or designing it? Is the world a simulation that adjusts to your story, or a mirror reflecting how you choose to see? Perhaps the difference doesn't matter when you're lying in bed, eyes half closed, letting the room blur. What matters is the stillness that forms when you stop insisting that the world is out there, fixed and final. What matters is the slow realization that perception isn't just what enters the eyes, but what awakens behind them. Let your thoughts soften now, like pixels dissolving into mist. The mind doesn't need to solve anything, not now. Let the need to interpret fall away. In the warmth of this moment, the game can pause. You can rest, not because the simulation ends, but because you no longer need to control the rendering. Let's go even deeper now, into the next layer of illusion, the shiny facade of success. What if that, too, is just a trick of the light? The success spell. There's a strange weight in the word success, not because it's heavy in itself, but because of the centuries of longing it carries. It tiptoes into our minds when we're children, slipped in by stories, parents, screens. It whispers, be someone. Not just anyone, but someone seen, someone praised, someone who stands on a mountain of accomplishments while the world watches. But have you ever climbed toward that summit, only to feel nothing? There's a silence behind success that no applause can fill. A moment when the room is clapping, but your chest is hollow. You smiled at the camera, hit the milestone, checked the boxes, yet something soft and unspoken in you asks, is this it? Two voices sit on a park bench one afternoon. One says, I did everything right. Degree, job, house. People call me successful, but I feel like I'm missing the point. The other stirs their coffee and murmurs, maybe you were chasing their dream, not yours. That's the spell. The illusion that success must look like a trophy, a number, a title, that it must be measured and displayed. The deeper illusion is that it will finally complete you. But what if the race was rigged? What if you were running in a circle, not toward a finish line, but away from yourself? Real success doesn't shout. It doesn't need to be posted. It's quiet, like the peace of a walk with no destination, the stillness in your breath when no one is watching, when you are not proving anything to anyone, not even to yourself. And this brings a harder question. Can you let it go? Can you unlearn the patterns, the expectations, the fantasy that if you just achieve more, you'll finally be enough? Because the truth is, the more we tie our worth to outcomes, the more we vanish behind them. If peace, not prestige, was the prize, would your life look the same? Maybe success isn't something to earn. Maybe it's something to release, a spell that breaks the moment you stop trying to deserve your existence. There's a peculiar freedom in choosing presence over performance, in knowing that your life is already meaningful, simply because you're here, awake, breathing. No spotlight required. And so, just for tonight, let's silence the applause. Let's sit in the stillness and feel what remains when the striving ends. Because behind the illusion of success waits the deeper illusion of failure. The failure illusion. Sometimes the loudest teacher wears the quietest clothes. It doesn't arrive with applause, nor does it shine. It stumbles in, messy and misunderstood, often wearing the label of failure. But what if failure isn't the enemy at all? but the first honest conversation life ever has with us. Two friends sit by a vending machine late at night, shoes dusty from walking too far, hearts heavier than they'd planned. One of them shrugs with a bitter laugh and says, "So I bombed that interview, said the wrong thing, froze up. Guess it's back to square one." The other leans back, sipping lukewarm tea from a paper cup, and replies, "Maybe square one's just where you remember who you are." You think that's such a bad place to be? Failure is never still. It nudges. It redirects. Sometimes it slams a door just to push you toward the one you were too afraid to knock on. And while success often wraps itself in comfort and certainty, failure strips you bare, down to what's real. In that naked space, without the costumes of confidence, we start to see our truest shapes. There's a strange grace in falling, not the kind you see in highlight reels or biographies, the kind that happens when your voice cracks in the middle of a sentence, and someone stays anyway. When the plan collapses, but a new instinct rises from the rubble. Failure doesn't punish, it purifies. Like a tide pulling away everything loose, it leaves only what's anchored. And if you listen closely, failure has a rhythm, a kind of cracked music. You trip, you pause, you hear yourself breathing differently. It's not silence, it's the sound of transformation. A woman holds a broken mug in her hands, porcelain fragments from a gift she loved. At first she curses the clumsiness, then, oddly, she smiles. "Maybe it's a sign," she whispers. "Time to stop pretending that holding on always means strength." In our culture, failure is dressed in shame. But the truth? The most beautiful selves often bloom through it, not despite it. The rejections that broke you? They were pruning. The missteps? They softened the edges of your pride. And the moments you wanted to disappear? They became the mirror where ego stepped aside and something quieter emerged. There's a question worth carrying with you, like a stone in the pocket. If I'm not winning, does that mean I'm lost or just rerouted? It's tempting to hold tightly to a single definition of success, a job, a number, an outcome. But what if success isn't a destination, just a tempo we march to because others clap in time? And what if failure is the first time you hear your own music instead? Sometimes we only begin again because we've failed completely. And that beginning, that fresh, unburdened breath, might be the one you carry into the life you were meant to live all along. So, let's not fear the detours. Let's not resist the falls. Tonight, let them be gentle. Let them float in the quiet of your chest like a raft. You're not sinking. You're drifting towards something you can't yet name. And that is still movement. Now, let the idea of judgment slide off your shoulders. The clock doesn't measure the worth of your minutes, because next we wander into the illusion of time well spent. The productivity trap. There's a strange sound in the silence after work, the soft guilt of not doing enough. Even when the clock stops ticking, the mind keeps sprinting. Because somewhere along the way, we were taught that our value lives in our output, not in our breath, not in our presence, but in the things we create, the goals we chase, the boxes we check. How many hours did you work today? Only 6, but I also answered emails while eating. Ah, so, still productive. A chuckle, a shared understanding, but underneath it, a quiet ache. We live in a world that counts. It counts your steps. It counts your likes. It counts your sleep hours. Not for peace, but for efficiency. Even rest has been hijacked, turned into a tool to get back to the grind sharper, faster, stronger. You're not sleeping, you're recharging. You're not relaxing, you're resetting. Every moment becomes a prelude to more effort. It's a clever trap because it wears the mask of ambition. We praise the hustle, we glorify the busy, we make icons out of burnouts and myths out of those who rise before the sun. But what we often fail to ask is, at what cost? If you stopped producing, if you simply were, would you still feel valuable? Would you still feel loved? Or would some invisible voice whisper that you've wasted your time, your gifts, your chance? A man once sat by the river every morning, sipping tea and listening to birds. His friends called him lazy. "Don't you want to do something with your life?" they asked. He smiled, sipped again, and replied, "I am doing something. I'm being alive." They didn't understand, but he did. He had escaped the productivity trap not by rejecting work, but by refusing to tie his identity to it. There is wisdom in rest, not just in stopping, but in stopping without guilt, in pausing and realizing that you are not a machine. You are not built for endless output. You are a breathing being, not a blinking cursor on a screen. If you rest with unease, ask yourself, who taught you that stillness is sin? Was it your parents, school, society, or something deeper? A fear that without constant doing you might be forgotten? A gentle reminder, your worth is not a spreadsheet. You are not a project to manage. And peace is not a reward for exhaustion. It's a birthright. Let's slow down. Let's stop fixing ourselves long enough to remember that we were never broken. The sun still rises without alarms. Trees still grow without to-do lists. And you are still worthy, even when you do absolutely nothing. Now let's set down our tools, silence the inner foreman, and step into something even stranger than the pressure to perform. The eerie sensation that someone or something is always watching. The audience illusion. There's a moment, quiet but undeniable, when you realize that most of your life has been a stage, not a grand one, no curtain, no applause, just a subtle sense that someone, somewhere, is always watching. A parent's approving smile, a friend's raised brow, a stranger's passing glance. Even when you're alone, there's a whisper in the back of your mind. Act right. You're not the only one. From our first steps, we're told who's watching. Say thank you to Grandma. Don't do that in public. Smile for the camera. The audience forms before we even know we're performing. It grows, filling with teachers, classmates, co-workers. Then one day, it becomes invisible. And strangely, more powerful. I don't know why I care what people think. Someone once confessed at a bus stop. But I still wear lipstick to take out the trash. The old man beside her didn't laugh. He simply nodded and said, "We all have ghosts in the mirror." That's the illusion, that there's always a mirror, that someone's always looking. So we posture, edit, filter, like we're crafting a version of ourselves for an audience that's never fully there. A smile too wide, a silence too heavy. A joke rehearsed not for joy, but for validation. And still, most of the time, no one is actually watching. No one is refreshing your profile. No one remembers the thing you said awkwardly 3 weeks ago. The lights dimmed long ago, but we keep acting, just in case. You walk into a quiet cafe, reach for a glass, and realize your hand is trembling. Not from fear, but from habit. The habit of being observed. The performance that doesn't know when to end. But what if the audience was never real? What if it was just your memory of them, your anxiety stitched into a spotlight? What would you stop pretending to be? Would you still write emails with a false cheer? Would you still wear the expensive jacket that itches? Would you still hold in your tears like they're shameful, even when you're alone? One night someone told me, I stopped singing in the shower because I imagined someone outside listening. I asked, did you ever start again? She smiled. Yes, last week. And the echo was enough. Sometimes the only observer is the echo of your own mind. And when you realize that, a softness enters. You begin to wonder, not what others think of you, but who you are when the stage is gone, when no one's clapping, when the room is empty and still. You begin to live. So now breathe. There's no one watching, no curtain call, only the gentle quiet of your breath returning home. And as that breath slows, we step off the stage. We let the spotlight fade and begin to vanish softly into deeper illusions. The Vanishing Self. Close your eyes for a moment. Try to find yourself, not your name, not your reflection in the mirror, not even the stream of thoughts passing through your mind. Try to find the you behind all of it, the one who observes, the one who knows experience is happening. Where is it? At first it seems obvious. I'm here, you might say. But press further. When you feel an emotion, who is the one feeling it? When you think a thought, who hears it? The longer you search for this I, the more it recedes, like mist evaporating under morning light. The self begins to feel less like a thing and more like a breeze, present but ungraspable. One evening, two friends sat beneath a quiet sky. Do you ever feel like you're watching your life from the outside? One asked. The other nodded. Like you're behind glass, thinking, reacting, but not really solid, not really there. Exactly, the first replied. And the more I try to hold on to me, the more it slips. This isn't just philosophy. It's something deeply felt when you turn attention inward. Neuroscience, too, has begun hinting at this. There is no single self-center in the brain, only scattered networks lighting up when we speak about who we are. What we call self may be a process, patterns of memory, attention, narrative, and sensation, woven together so quickly it feels like a single identity. But if there's no true center, no unchanging core self, then who is in control? Who is choosing, reacting, longing? It's unsettling, even dizzying, to realize that what we call I might just be a loop. A system watching itself, narrating, reacting, adjusting. Not a driver, but a dance. Yet in that realization comes a strange peace. If you are not a fixed thing, you are free to change. If you are not a trapped identity, you are not bound by your past. Like clouds shifting in the sky, the mind flows, and perhaps the suffering comes not from change, but from pretending something inside you must stay the same. So what's left when the self dissolves? Just presence, just awareness, not a watcher perched behind your eyes, but the witnessing itself. And from that space, still and wordless, something deeper begins to stir. Now listen closely, not to the silence, but to the voice that rises to fill it. The inner narrator, the story spinner, the one who tries to stitch all this mystery into meaning. Let's follow that voice and see who speaks next. The narrator isn't neutral. There's a voice speaking softly in your head right now. Not the one narrating the story, but the one that's always been there, long before podcasts or playlists or even language made sense to you. That quiet murmur, always commenting, always explaining, but rarely questioned. And here's the gentle truth. That voice isn't neutral. It doesn't simply describe, it interprets, it edits, it adds color to facts and tone to silence. Like a commentator watching your life from the sidelines, it doesn't just say, you fell. It whispers, you failed again. It doesn't just say, You're quiet. It wonders, are they ignoring you? The narrator, it turns out, is a survivor, shaped by evolution to detect danger and disappointment, and to label uncertainty as threat. It wants you safe, not necessarily truthful. And so, it rewrites your story, not to help you grow, but to keep you from risk. It is ancient software wearing the mask of reason. Late at night, you may catch it narrating things no one else hears. The tone of a friend's text becomes rejection. A glance becomes judgment. A pause in conversation becomes failure. But what if none of it is real? What if it's just the narrator, improvising again? A man sits quietly on a bench in the early morning mist. A stranger passes, nods politely, and keeps walking. The man's mind begins spinning a thread. Did they recognize me? Were they avoiding me? Was that pity? Or maybe it was just a nod. You see, the voice doesn't know what's true. It knows what feels safe. It would rather you assume the worst and be wrong than trust the unknown and get hurt. But in doing so, it builds a cage from commentary, and often it locks you inside. A gentle voice asks from the dark, "Do you ever wonder why your mind is always talking?" And the answer comes quietly. Maybe because silence feels dangerous. But that silence is where presence lives, where truth breathes, where healing waits. If every thought is framed by a narrator with an agenda, then how many of your emotions are reactions to fiction? How many times have you suffered from a sentence you whispered only to yourself? You are not your inner voice. You are the one listening, the one behind the curtain, behind the script. And sometimes, the most radical act of peace is not to argue with the narrator, but to stop following its plot altogether. Let the story go unfinished tonight. Let the main character wander off script. Let the narration trail into quiet, because beneath the dialogue, there's something older than thought, softer than survival, a space, a breath, a moment unnarrated. And from there, we gently walk toward the next illusion, not of story, but of feeling. Let's step softly into the illusion of emotion. The emotion trick. You feel a sudden drop in your chest, and the world shifts. Everything looks grayer. Someone asks if you're okay, and you almost say, "I'm fine." But inside you wonder, am I? What changed? Nothing. And yet, everything. Emotions are like colors painted across the sky of your awareness, but they're slippery things. One moment, a faint memory drifts in. Maybe the smell of an old bookstore, or a phrase someone once said, and without your permission, your mood bends to its tone. But was that sadness yours? Or just a passing cloud your mind walked beneath? Two voices speak in a soft conversation on a park bench as the sun sets behind them. You ever feel suddenly down, but can't tell why? Yeah, all the time. I used to think it meant something was wrong with me. And now I think it's just weather, internal weather. This is the trick of emotion. It dresses itself in importance, demands we obey, begs us to react. But much of what we feel isn't grounded in the present moment. It's an echo, a shadow of something once felt, triggered by a smell, a word, a low blood sugar level, or even poor sleep. Like a melody bleeding through the wall from the apartment next door, it sounds personal, but it's not your music. To live as if every emotion is a command is to become a leaf tossed by the wind. But if you can notice the emotion, truly notice it, without rushing to fix or follow it, it begins to shift. The sadness becomes softer. The anger loses its edge. Like waves breaking on the shore, feelings rise and fall, whether or not you try to catch them. A quiet moment passes, and the voices return. So, what do you do when you feel overwhelmed? I breathe. I remind myself that feelings aren't facts. They're just visitors. Visitors? Yeah, some bring gifts, others just pass through. What would it be like to feel deeply, but not be ruled by what you feel? To ride the waves instead of drowning in them? This isn't cold detachment, it's compassionate clarity. It's the difference between saying, I am angry, and saying, I feel anger. One makes it your identity, the other makes it just a moment. So next time the sadness sneaks in, or joy surges for no reason at all, don't ask why, ask how long. Watch it, let it move, let it leave, because even the strongest tide must eventually return to the sea. And as the emotional tide retreats, we stand at the edge of something deeper, the illusion of separation. Let's step into that next. The separation myth. You think you're alone in this moment, tucked beneath blankets, listening in silence. But the silence itself is shared. The breath you just took wasn't all yours. Part of it once moved through leaves, through someone else's laughter, through air warmed by a stranger's sigh in another city. The skin might feel like a wall, but it's more like a soft membrane, porous, tender, humming with exchange. A quiet murmur in the background. Is this seat taken? No, go ahead. And just like that, two lives brush. No grand story, no fireworks, just the hum of presence, two existences briefly stitched together by a shared glance, a gesture, a kindness. It's not dramatic, but it's real. We're taught that we end where our skin does, that the self is this singular armored thing. But it's not. Your moods bend in response to others. A frown can wrinkle your thoughts. A smile from across a room can smooth your chest like warm water poured on cold glass. You're not sealed. You're saturated. Even your voice, have you noticed? Its tone carries echoes of every person who's ever spoken to you with love or anger or fear. You didn't invent your voice. You curated it from the world, piece by invisible piece. Do you ever feel like your feelings aren't just yours? All the time. Like I caught someone else's weather. Sometimes even pain passes like wind, blown into you by someone else's storm. And yet we walk around pretending we're islands, pretending we don't ripple into each other, even in silence. There's a quiet sadness in believing you're separate. Because once that illusion takes root, compassion feels optional. But when you truly see the interwoven threads, when you feel how a simple touch or tone can alter another person's day, kindness stops being a virtue and becomes a kind of realism, a recognition of shared breath. The person you call other is only other because of where you place the frame. Zoom out, and the lines blur. A child's tears, a stranger's grief, the man who cut in line, who might be rushing to a hospital. When you stop believing the skin is the edge of self, every moment becomes a bridge. I didn't mean to bump into you. It's all right. We're all walking each other home anyway. And maybe that's the quiet truth we forget. There's no such thing as a single story, only overlapping ones. No clean line between yours and mine. Even now, this voice in your ear, it's not separate from you anymore. It's inside you, shaping thought, sharing breath. So if you've felt distant from the world lately, consider this a gentle hand resting in yours, not to pull you anywhere, just to remind you, you were never really apart. Let the boundary soften. Let the world lean in. Let's follow that thread deeper now, into the illusion of goals. The Goal Mirage. There's something hauntingly beautiful about the quiet moment between effort and arrival, when you're almost there, yet not quite. That breathless second when you tell yourself, just a bit more. But what if that bit more is an illusion that keeps shifting the finish line every time you reach for it? We live in a culture of pursuit. Dreams, goals, milestones. These are the banners we carry into the battlefield of life. We're taught to visualize success, write it down, chase it hard. But when the chase becomes endless, the goal starts to dissolve into a mirage, a shimmering promise on the horizon that fades as you step closer. A man once said to his friend on a long walk, "I think once I get that promotion, I'll finally breathe." His friend smiled softly and replied, "That's what you said about the last one." They both paused. The sun was setting, and for a moment, they simply stood in silence. No planning, no chasing, just being. This mirage isn't just motivational fluff. It's a wiring deep in the mind. Dopamine rewards the anticipation of achievement more than the arrival itself. You feel most alive when you're reaching, but strangely hollow when you actually grasp it. And so, unconsciously, the mind begins to move the target, not to torture you, but to keep the thrill alive. It whispers, "You could be more." But what if that whisper is not a call to rise, but a trap in disguise? Sit with that for a moment. If you stopped chasing, would you collapse into purposelessness, or would you finally awaken into presence? If there were no more goals, no more levels to climb, no more upgrades to earn, what would remain? Would you feel lost without a mission, or would you meet yourself for the first time? The truth is, goals are useful until they become masters. They can guide, inspire, challenge. But they can also exhaust, distract, and quietly poison your sense of enoughness. The illusion lies not in setting a goal, but in believing that only the goal gives you worth. It's like running on a treadmill thinking there's a door at the end. You're sweating, panting, staring ahead, but all you're doing is running in place while believing the scenery will change. Sometimes, peace doesn't arrive when you reach the destination. It arrives when you stop asking the road to make you whole. A woman once sat at her desk late into the night, eyes glazed, rewriting her to-do list for the 5th time. Her partner quietly walked in and asked, "What happens if you don't finish it?" She stared at the paper for a long time before replying, "I don't know. Maybe I'd feel like I failed." He leaned in gently and said, "Or maybe you'd realize you're already enough." And in that pause, in that breath, something softened. A tight thread in her chest loosened, not because the task was done, but because the chase had momentarily stopped. So now, in the soft space between your breaths, ask yourself gently, if you no longer needed to earn the right to rest, would you rest? Or would you keep chasing out of habit? Let's leave the footsteps behind. Let's step off the path, just for now, and lie down in the stillness where no carrot dangles, where no voice whispers, "Not enough." Because from movement, we descend into stillness. And from stillness, we prepare to question another illusion, the idea that our memories are stored like objects in a vault. But before we go there, just breathe. You're not a project. You're already here. The memory file illusion. There's a quiet comfort in believing that memory is safe, like an old attic where everything remains untouched. A dusty box of birthday candles, a photograph with a smile you swore was real. We reach into those shadows expecting the past to greet us like an old friend. But what if that friend had changed each time we remembered them? Not maliciously, just subtly, shifted by emotion, softened by desire, sharpened by regret. Wait, someone says in the middle of a sleepy conversation. Wasn't that on your 21st birthday, not your graduation? A soft pause, a gentle correction, and yet something inside flickers. The story had felt so solid, but suddenly it's a blur. You see, memory doesn't live in a locked cabinet. It breathes. Each time we revisit it, we unknowingly rewrite it, not like editing a file, but like painting over a canvas, layer upon layer until the original becomes guesswork. And it's not just the details that change, it's the meaning. One rainy night, someone walks by an old street corner and suddenly smiles. That memory, once painful, is now peaceful. Why? Because the heart needed it to be. Memory bends for comfort. It morphs to match our current self. It dances with who we are now, not who we were then. So, do you think that moment actually happened the way you remember it? A hesitant shrug. I think so. But now that you ask, that's the crack. That's the space where illusion seeps in. But this isn't a flaw. It's a function. The mind doesn't archive. It reimagines. Because life isn't a documentary. It's a dream you're trying to retell in the morning light. Which brings us to something heavier. If your memories shift, then your sense of self, built from those memories, also shifts. Are you a solid structure, or a story rewritten nightly by a half-asleep scribe? There's beauty in that if you let it settle. You are not frozen. You are a mosaic of remembered feelings, stitched from colors that change with time. And sometimes, not knowing the full truth of a memory is the mind's way of protecting your peace. I still remember the way she looked at me, someone says with a sigh, half laughing, and then quieter. At least I think I do. The candle flickers in the room. The night deepens. And as your thoughts begin to fade, gently folded under sleep's soft hand, ask yourself, if memory is a mirror that fogs each time you breathe on it, then maybe peace is in letting it blur. Now, let the files close. Let's drift into something even subtler, the illusion of control over thought itself. The thought magnet. Sometimes when you lie awake at night, a thought appears, quietly, like a stranger knocking on your window during a rainstorm. You don't remember inviting it in. It just arrives. A memory, a worry, a strange question with no answer. Where did it come from? We're often told we are the thinker of our thoughts, that our mind is a clean desk, and ideas are tools we reach for with purpose. But the more you watch your mind, the more you begin to notice something strange. Thoughts seem to appear on their own, like soap bubbles rising from nowhere, popping before you even get to hold them. Did I make that thought, you wonder? Or was it made of old echoes? Something you heard years ago, a face you forgot, a smell you didn't notice. One evening, two friends sit on a quiet porch. The air is still, and the conversation drifts like mist. Do you ever feel like your mind just throws stuff at you? One asks, watching the stars. All the time, the other replies. It's like a playlist I never made. Some songs I like, others I skip. So who's really choosing the songs? A pause, then a soft laugh. Maybe we're not the DJ, just the room the music plays in. And just like that, it clicks. Maybe the thoughts that pass through you aren't you. Maybe they're just guests, some friendly, some irritating, some confusing. But you're not their creator. You're the space they move through. The awareness that notices their arrival. This idea shifts everything. If you are the house and thoughts are visitors, then your job isn't to stop the doorbell from ringing. It's to decide who gets to come in for tea and who you simply let pass by. You don't have to fight every worry. You don't have to debate every judgment. You can let them float in and float out, like clouds across a sleeping sky. This is what peace starts to feel like. Not a blank mind, but a gentle one. A mind that doesn't grip every thought as truth or identity. It's tempting to think mastery means control, but maybe real strength is the quiet hospitality of a temple, open, steady, undisturbed by passing wind. And when thoughts no longer define you, when their magnetism weakens, something beautiful begins. A space opens, a stillness beneath the chatter. What will you do with that stillness? The friend on the porch turns and smiles. So, if a bad thought shows up, do I just ignore it? Not ignore, the other says softly. Just don't serve it tea. Let them knock. Let them speak. But know that not every voice deserves your attention. Not every guest needs a seat at your table. Now, as you settle deeper into rest, feel the thoughts passing like fireflies through an open field. No need to chase. No need to hold. Just witness and let them go. And with the house of your mind gently illuminated by calm awareness, let's now open the windows, let the breeze in, and question the illusion of time's direction. The one-way time lie. There's a quiet strangeness to the night. When the world slows down and the ticking clock feels louder than usual, you begin to wonder, what exactly is time doing? Is it really flowing? Or are we the ones drifting across something that never moves? Picture this. Time, not as a river, but as a vast, unmoving tapestry. Every moment stitched side by side like stars on a black cloth, not behind or ahead, just present. But your mind, like a flashlight in the dark, only sees one patch at a time. The past? A trail of footprints your light once touched. The future? A hill still hidden by the shadows, but the terrain hasn't changed, only the beam has moved. Have you ever walked into a room and felt like you've already been there? Yeah, or known what someone was going to say before they said it. Like echoes from a place you haven't reached yet. Déjà vu, dreams, instincts. They ripple across that still fabric like vibrations before a sound. You're not predicting. You're brushing up against another part of the tapestry, another coordinate. Maybe time isn't whispering. Maybe it's just humming. And every now and then, your thoughts catch the tune. There's no command center in your head shouting now. No divine conductor waving a baton. Just awareness flickering across the frames of a film already set. If that's true, what is memory but a lingering warmth from where your light used to rest? And what if the pull you sometimes feel, that quiet urgency with no explanation, is your future nudging you, not your past? A barista at a late-night cafe once leaned over the counter and said, "I feel like I've seen you before." Really? Not exactly like this, but close enough to make me pause. He wasn't flirting. It wasn't romantic. It was something softer. A moment of strange familiarity, like life blinking twice in the same place. Maybe these loops are more common than we think, just subtle enough to be dismissed, just loud enough to tug. Even science stumbles here. Quantum models suggest time is not a sequence, but a structure. Einstein himself once hinted that the distinction between past, present, and future is a stubborn illusion. If that's so, your childhood is still unfolding somewhere. Your last heartbreak is still cracking open in a silent chamber. Your best day, maybe it hasn't happened yet, but it already is. Someone once asked, if the future already exists, can we ever change it? And the reply came back like a breeze. Maybe it's not about changing the future, but aligning with the part of you that already lived it well. There's a comfort in that, isn't there? That your path may not be entirely random. That even in your uncertainty, some version of you has already made peace with what's coming. Perhaps this is why, when we sit in stillness, really stillness, we sometimes feel a sense of guidance, not from above, not from others, but from later. So maybe you're not lost. Maybe you're just standing at the edge of the flashlight, waiting for the beam to slide forward. Time isn't pushing you, it's inviting you. And as you lie here, resting, it's okay if you drift. Let your mind wander across that great quiet map. Let memories blur into tomorrow's dreams. Let the story unfold out of order. Now, softly, we turn to something even trickier. What if what you notice becomes what you believe? Let's walk gently into the illusion of attention as truth. The spotlight illusion returns. Somewhere in your mind, there's a tiny beam of light. It doesn't flood the whole stage. It selects, it isolates, it chooses one moment, one thought, one feeling, and magnifies it until it feels like the entire world. That's the illusion of the spotlight. What you focus on becomes truth. But just outside that light, 1,000 quiet truths are unfolding, unnoticed. Why do I always feel like something's missing? She asked, curled up on the couch, her eyes glazed from a long day. He looked at her thoughtfully. Maybe because you're only looking where the light falls. She tilted her head. You mean, I'm missing something because I'm not paying attention to it? Not just that, he said. Your attention is like a flashlight in a cave. Wherever it points, you see shapes, walls, shadows, but that doesn't mean the rest of the cave vanishes. And that's the trick of consciousness. We confuse what's visible with what's real. But the world doesn't pause when we turn away. The conversation you're not hearing continues. The emotions you're not ready to feel still murmur under the surface. The possibilities you haven't noticed still wait in the wings, like actors rehearsing in silence, waiting for their cue. Sometimes, anxiety is nothing more than the spotlight locked onto one moment from the past, refusing to move. Other times, we obsess over a thought, not because it's true, but because it's brightly lit. It screams while everything else whispers. But here's where the illusion deepens. The mind can't light up everything at once, so we mistake what we can see for all there is. Imagine standing on a dark stage. One character steps into the spotlight, angry and shouting. You judge the entire play based on this one scene. But behind the curtain, love is blooming, grief is softening, healing is quietly happening off stage. You just weren't looking there. So what do I do with that? She asked quietly. He smiled, not with certainty, but with softness. Maybe nothing. Maybe you just widen the beam. She paused. And if I can't, then remember, just because something isn't lit doesn't mean it isn't real. In truth, your focus is powerful, but not all powerful. It's like listening through a keyhole while the entire orchestra plays in the next room. If you believe the melody ends at the door, you'll miss the symphony of your life unfolding. And that's the quiet danger. Your blind spots are more powerful than your focus, because what you don't notice still shapes you. It steers your thoughts, your relationships, your beliefs, without ever announcing itself. It's the whisper behind your choices, the emotion behind your reaction, the memory you forgot but still obey. So tonight, before sleep carries you away, take a moment to dim the light. Let the scene blur. Let your focus soften, and ask gently, what parts of your life are happening off stage? What's quietly waiting in the dark? As the curtains fall on this segment, let's turn inward, not to what we see, but to what we've overlooked. The illusion of attention has played its part. Now let's slip past the spotlight and step into the illusion of personal history. The story you think you are. There's a moment, quiet and almost unnoticed, when your mind replays a memory, not because it's useful, but because it fits the script. The version of you that you've rehearsed. That memory becomes a thread. Enough threads, and the mind weaves a story. You might call it you. But pause here. Who's doing the telling? Each of us narrates a private biography. We speak it without words, through preferences, regrets, the way we flinch at a song or pause before texting a certain name. These aren't just experiences. They are edits. A director behind the scenes, trimming the tape, skipping over whole scenes, reshaping the meaning of old lines. Remember when I failed that test? Someone murmurs in the soft dark. It still feels like I am that failure. And another voice replies, not cruelly, just curious. But what if that version of you was never real? Just one draft out of thousands. Our stories are stitched from heartbreaks and highlights. But what we remember is rarely the full scene. We remember the color of the walls, but not what we were thinking. We recall the breakup, but not the 1,000 quiet kindnesses before it. A look, a breath, a decision. You decide which moments matter. And the rest? They vanish like scenery when the spotlight moves on. You've probably told yourself, I've always been this way. But is that truth or habit? A defense? A familiar room, even if the furniture is uncomfortable? Even a prison feels safe if you've memorized every creak in the floorboards. Sometimes you meet someone who doesn't know your story. They don't flinch at the chapter titles you hide. They don't see you as the broken thing you're afraid you are. And in their eyes, you find an unsettling freedom. The possibility that you don't have to keep telling that same old story. But letting go of your narrative isn't silence. It's space. Without the story, there's room to grow strange and new. To laugh in ways you never wrote into your script. To wake up and not remember who you're supposed to be, and find that oddly comforting. Wait, someone whispers under a shared blanket, breath soft with sleep. If I stop being the person who always runs, who will I be? The answer comes slowly, like fog lifting from a still lake. Maybe someone who walks toward. And now, gently, let that version rest. Lay the storybook on the nightstand. Its pages will wait. For now, let the silence between your old sentences widen into wonder. Because beyond the tales we tell, there is something spacious and unnamed, and we're just beginning to explore it. Next, we drift not into another plot, but into the very shape of space, the illusion of scale, the vastness between the stars, and the tiny galaxy hidden behind closed eyes. The scale illusion. There's something quietly humbling about standing between two infinities, one beneath the skin, one above the sky. You are not the center. You are not the edge. You are suspended in a space your mind cannot fully measure. The tiny tremble of an electron, the yawning curve of a galaxy's spiral arm, both exist, both are real, but neither fits neatly into your lived experience. Why? Because scale deceives you. Your brain, marvelous as it is, did not evolve to grasp the unfathomable. It's built for the middle world, for things you can hold, walk to, count, lift. It struggles with the microscopic and collapses before the cosmic. And so atoms feel like theory, galaxies like fiction. Infinity becomes a word, not a feeling. Yet here's the truth. What's beyond your scale is not beyond existence. The ant is just as real as the star, and reality doesn't shrink, just because your imagination does. Do you think about space sometimes? She asked, as they lay in the dark, the ceiling above them like a night sky without stars. Not really, he replied. It's too big. I'd rather just think about tomorrow's groceries. She smiled, not to mock him, but because she understood. Infinity was exhausting. Groceries felt safe. But what if that exhaustion, that refusal, wasn't a flaw, but a feature, a quiet mercy? After all, if you could fully grasp the sheer immensity of time and space, wouldn't your mind split like glass under pressure? So instead, the brain filters, simplifies, turns infinity into digestible morsels, and in doing so, it fools you into thinking size defines truth. This illusion is subtle, like fog. You don't see it, but it's everywhere. You ignore a bacteria because it's too small. You dismiss a star's death because it's too far. But your body is made of stardust, and your life depends on cells you'll never see. Isn't that a kind of poetry? That what you can't perceive still shapes you? If we take a step back, farther than comfort allows, we might ask, what else are we blind to, not out of ignorance, but simply because of scale? Emotions too subtle to name, thoughts too fast to catch, forces too slow to feel, unfolding across generations. If you can't see it, touch it, or measure it, do you believe it less? Maybe love is like that, she whispered. Invisible, but still there. Like atoms. He laughed. Or like taxes. Both invisible, she said, but one is warmer. So what does this illusion teach us truly? Maybe it whispers this: don't trust size as a guide for truth. Don't let your senses be the judge of what's real. Let awe expand your understanding. Let mystery remind you that you're not meant to grasp it all. You are a ripple on the surface of something incomprehensibly deep. And just as you begin to feel the vastness, the strange vertigo of existence, we gently bring you back, out of the stars, out of the atoms, back into the room, because now it's time to explore a different kind of illusion, one closer, more familiar, the feeling that someone's always watching. The spotlight syndrome. Have you ever walked into a room and felt like every eye was on you? Like a heat lamp had suddenly descended from the ceiling and you were trapped beneath its glow? That subtle, stinging feeling of being seen, judged, evaluated, it's almost primal. And yet, the strange truth is, no one's really looking. Or if they are, it's only for a moment, before their attention returns to their own swirling thoughts. That's the spotlight syndrome, the illusion that the world's gaze is fixed on you, when in fact, it's barely glancing. This psychological illusion isn't born of arrogance, it's born of awareness. You're intimately familiar with your own story, your flaws, your quirks, your outfit today. So naturally, it feels like the rest of the world must be too. But most people, they're not noticing the stain on your shirt. They're too worried about the coffee stain on theirs. Do you think they noticed my voice crack during that sentence? She whispers in the dim light of the car, post-presentation. Honestly, I didn't even notice it. He replies, eyes still scrolling through his own email inbox. We think the world is holding up a mirror to us, when in reality, everyone is polishing their own. The implications of this are quietly liberating. If the world is not scrutinizing you with a magnifying glass, then what are you still hiding from? What would you dare to say, or wear, or try, if you truly believed no one was keeping score? What would happen if you danced when the music moved you, even if you were alone in the park? Or wore the wild outfit that made you feel like sunlight, even if it wasn't trending on social media? The freedom is immense, but it begins with one radical idea. Most people aren't watching you. They're watching themselves. And if they are watching, they'll forget. Memory is fickle, and embarrassment is rarely permanent. You're the main character in your own life, but a background blur in most other people's. The pressure you feel is often self-generated. The spotlight, imagined, and the judgment, more often a projection of your own. I used to obsess over what people might say about my job switch, he says, stirring his tea slowly. And now, I realized no one ever asked. They were busy worrying about their own. Once that illusion shatters, something remarkable begins to unfold. A deeper authenticity surfaces. You start to do things not to be seen, but because they feel real. You stop scripting your actions for applause and start acting out of alignment. You say no when you mean it. You speak gently when it's needed. And you become strangely lighter. Because the real spotlight isn't external. It's internal. It's the awareness you hold of yourself. And that, paradoxically, is where true presence lives. Not in impressing others, but in becoming deeply honest with your own heartbeat. So if no one is really watching, who could you finally become? Let's turn off the spotlight now. Gently dim the stage lights in your mind. The show is over. Or maybe it never started. And in that quiet darkness, we drift towards something more mysterious. The illusion of right now. The present moment illusion. The world tells you to live in the present. But what if that present is always just a whisper behind the beat? You lift your hand. You feel the air. But your awareness of it comes after the fact, milliseconds later. Your brain, trying its best to keep up, delivers a highlight reel stitched together by memory and prediction. The sensation of now is more of a suggestion than a truth, a soft echo, trailing the footstep of time. Two strangers sit quietly at a small bus stop bench. One glances at the clouds drifting like forgotten thoughts. The other breaks the silence. Do you think this is the present? The first responds, almost amused. By the time you asked, it wasn't. They both laugh, not because it's funny, but because they both felt something slip through their fingers. The moment they thought they had already passed. This is the illusion we all walk in, believing we're here, fully. But reality delays itself just enough to keep us slightly out of sync, like music and lyrics that almost, but never quite, align. And yet, this delay is merciful. If we experienced every input exactly as it arrived, without time to translate or soften, the world would overwhelm. The lag is the lullaby, a buffer between chaos and comprehension. Your breath, it feels current, but it's the past you're breathing into the shape of now. The sound in your ear, it arrived before you welcomed it. Even this sentence, what you're hearing, has already happened. You're always reading history, just moments behind. And so, the question arises, can you ever be truly present? Or are we all just shadows, forever chasing light that has already moved on? A teacher once told a student, be present. But the student asked back, where should I stand if the present keeps running from me? And the teacher, pausing, said softly, stand in your awareness of that. That may be all we can do. Be tender with the chase, not to catch the moment, but to feel its warmth as it passes. You don't need to grip time like a rope to hold yourself steady. You're already flowing in it, gently carried by delay. And perhaps that's enough. If the present is a mirage, then peace may come not from catching it, but from resting in the rhythm of its vanishing. Let's drift now, just a little further, into the illusion of place. Because if time is an echo, what does it truly mean to be somewhere? The illusion of here. Close your eyes for a moment, not in panic, not in prayer, just softly, like a leaf settling on still water. Where are you now? Are you in the room where your body is resting? Are you in the sensation of the breath moving through your nose? Are you drifting slightly forward into thought? Or are you floating slightly behind yourself, watching? Here is a word we treat as a compass point, a place we can touch or claim. But the truth is, it drifts. Here is more like a mood than a map. The moment you try to hold it, it moves, like a shadow at dusk. You might say, I'm lying on my bed, but your mind is in a memory from 3 years ago. Or someone says your name, and suddenly your here is in their voice, not your room. Here is a dancer with no bones, changing shape with every glance, every blink, every emotion. And in dreams, dreams untie the whole thing. You could be in a house that never existed, speaking to a person who never lived, and still feel that undeniable certainty. I'm here. But where is that? Two friends lie in silence. One whispers, "Do you ever feel like your body is just the costume your thoughts wear for this performance?" The other chuckles. "Yeah, and sometimes I'm not even sure who's directing the play." They laugh, not out of clarity, but comfort in the shared confusion. Because when you stop trying to pin down here, it gets quieter, softer. It feels less like a place and more like a pause. Maybe here isn't where you are. Maybe it's where you agree to meet your awareness. And if here is this flexible, this suggestible, then what does it mean to be lost? If you take the wrong train, if you forget where you parked, if you wake up not knowing the day, have you vanished? Or have you simply arrived in a different version of now, one your past self didn't expect? Maybe being lost is just dreaming in a direction you didn't choose. Maybe we're all wandering through overlapping maps, tracing routes that vanish once we turn. So next time you feel untethered, ask yourself gently, am I truly lost, or just paused between one here and the next? Because no matter how far you drift, the awareness that notices the drifting, that's you. And that noticing is always, uncannily, quietly, right here. Let's follow that gentle thread of awareness now and begin to question the illusion of physical boundaries. What if the edges you see are only stories the mind tells to feel safe in the fog? The edge that isn't there. Close your eyes, not to block the world out, but to feel how the world is still coming in. Air softens against your cheek. Light leaves echoes behind your eyelids. You think you've drawn a boundary. You think your body is a container. But even now, your skin exhales warmth into the night, and the room quietly breathes you in. You okay? Yeah. Just thinking how weird it is to be something and not be separate from anything. Happens to me at the beach. The water doesn't end where I thought it would. Exactly. We're taught to draw lines. Me, you, this, that. But there are no true walls, only agreements. Every edge is a whisper between two shifting things. Even your name was handed to you like a coat someone thought might fit. Your fingers carry traces of everything you've touched. Not just physically, emotionally too. You once comforted someone and walked away thinking you left it behind, but it stayed with you. You just forgot where it settled, and maybe they kept a part of you too. When your heartbeat slows, you start to notice that you're not quite contained. Thoughts drift in uninvited. A scent can pull tears from a memory you never meant to store. You think, this is my body. But is it? The food you ate this morning is becoming you. The breath you just took was someone else's a minute ago. Your edges blur. Two people sit quietly at the edge of a bus stop bench. Neither speaks, yet both shift slightly, making space without thinking. Not because they own the bench, but because something wordless tells them they both belong. That unspoken moment is more real than any border. You don't need to chase this feeling. It's not enlightenment or some spiritual high. It's already happening. You are already porous, already shared. And if nothing in you is fixed, then maybe nothing truly yours can be lost. What a relief that is, to stop guarding the door and realize there was no lock. I feel like I'm part of the room now, one voice murmurs. You always were, the other says softly. You just stopped naming it as separate. Let the silence between those words hold you now. You are not behind your skin. You are not trapped inside your name. You are part of the exchange, the pulse between inhale and exhale, between hello and goodbye, between being and becoming. So tonight, let yourself be open. Let the world drift through you gently, like a breeze through a wind chime. Let nothing be yours. Let everything be shared. And with that, let's walk forward now, into the next illusion. The idea that you own your time. The calendar. Control trick. Close your eyes and imagine a world with no dates, no deadlines, no ticking hands on the wall. What would happen if your phone never buzzed with a calendar alert and no Monday ever followed Sunday? Strange, isn't it? You might feel lost at first, like a ship without a compass. But soon, you might also feel something else, a strange sense of freedom. Calendars were created to bring order to chaos, to make the formless flow of time feel solid and countable. We invented weeks to split the endless stretch of days, months to track the moon, and hours to divide the light. But have you ever noticed how these tools often end up shaping you more than time itself? You don't feel hungry because it's noon. You eat because the clock says it's lunchtime. You rush to finish something not because your soul demands it, but because the calendar told you it's due. Yet outside our mental cages, the world continues, untamed. The moon waxes and wanes without needing a schedule. The ocean ebbs and flows without a planner. A tree doesn't know it's late spring. Your heartbeat doesn't know it's Tuesday. Do you think we'd feel less anxious if we stopped living by the clock? She asked him one night while they watched the sky turn from lavender to indigo. He laughed softly. Probably. Or maybe we'd just find a new thing to measure, like emotions or memories. But what if we didn't measure at all? She whispered. What if we just lived? There was a silence then, deep and wide. In that moment, it felt like the stars had stopped ticking too. The illusion of control through calendars is subtle. We schedule birthdays, holidays, appointments, even grief. We mark things as past or future, but rarely inhabit the now without a filter. By trying to control time, we often lose touch with its truth. Time is not a cage, it's a current. You were never meant to hold it still. So what happens if we stop measuring? Maybe you'd start listening more closely to your body's rhythm. Maybe you'd feel the seasons through your skin instead of reading them on a screen. Maybe your soul would breathe again, freed from the prison of productivity. Living meaningfully without measurement isn't chaos. It's intuition. It's waking up when you're rested, not when the alarm screams. It's speaking when your heart is full, not when the meeting starts. It's grieving when the ache rises, not on the anniversary. Letting go of the calendar doesn't mean you stop caring. It means you start feeling, deeply, honestly. without needing to label every experience as early or late, urgent or overdue. As the last number fades from the mental calendar, let the shape of time melt into something softer, something you don't need to manage. Drift into the idea that maybe life was never meant to be boxed into months and quarters. And maybe, just maybe, your soul already knows how to move forward, no schedule required. Now, let us dissolve time's grid and quietly wander into the illusion of permanence in others. The immortality we project. Even in the quietest moments, the mind whispers a lie, that those we love will always be here. It's not said out loud. It lives in the way we argue with our parents and assume we'll always have time to say sorry. It lingers in the way we cancel dinner with a friend, thinking next week will still be available. It floats in the way we look into our lover's eyes and believe the gaze will meet ours forever. But permanence is a trick of comfort, a projection we cast on people like a flashlight against a wall. We don't want to believe they are passing shadows, that every hello carries within it the seed of goodbye. Our minds, so desperate to avoid the pain of parting, build stories of immortality. We create silent contracts with the universe as if by loving someone deeply, we've ensured their place in our lives forever. And yet, every person you love is a sunset. Some burn brightly for years, others flicker out quietly. Some disappear slowly, the sky holding on in denial. Others are gone in an instant, like a flame extinguished mid-laugh. No warning, no rehearsal. Have you ever watched an old voicemail just to hear a voice that's no longer around? Or reached for your phone in excitement, only to remember that the person who used to answer is now only reachable in memory? That feeling, that tightness in the chest followed by silence, is the price of the illusion we carry. The illusion that they would always be there. But what if we didn't run from impermanence? What if, instead of fearing the end, we let it shape the way we show up in the present? Would we complain less and thank more? Would we kiss longer, listen better, let go of small resentments faster? Maybe we wouldn't just say, "I love you." We'd say it with the urgency of someone who understands it might be the last time. In a world where everyone is slowly leaving, love becomes sacred not because it stays, but because it doesn't. It's the fleetingness that makes it shine brighter. To hold someone lightly, knowing they are not ours to keep, that's not detachment, that's reverence. A soft voice might ask, "Doesn't that make it more painful?" Perhaps, but maybe love was never meant to protect us from pain. Maybe it was meant to teach us how to transform it, to feel deeply, to grieve openly, to remember boldly. So next time you sit beside someone you care about, let the silence stretch. Watch their face as if it's the last sunset of summer. Feel the miracle of their presence, not for how long it will last, but for the sheer wonder that it exists at all. Now, as we carry this ache-turned appreciation, let's gently shift into gratitude's embrace and wonder, if growth isn't always upward, can it be inward instead? The line that was never straight. You thought it would feel like steps, one foot in front of the other, always up. Better habits, calmer mornings, a stronger you. But then a bad week comes, and suddenly you're back where you swore you'd never be. Tears at midnight, the same anxious loop. You whisper, "I thought I was past this." A voice across the table answers, not loud, not wise, just present. Maybe you're not going backwards. Maybe you're just walking in a circle, wide enough that you mistake it for a line. Life rarely moves in a straight direction. It flows like a river through forgotten fields. Sometimes it floods, sometimes it dries, but always it shapes the land beneath it, even when you can't see it happening. The truth is, growth has no map. It spirals, it stumbles, it collapses, and then breathes again. Think of the way a wound heals. It itches, it cracks, it darkens before the skin closes. Healing looks like hurting until it doesn't. A girl once folded a paper crane every night for peace. Some nights she forgot. Some nights she cried as she folded. But in the end, she had 1,000. Not because she was perfect, but because she returned again and again. That's what makes the journey sacred. Not the line, the return. And what if, just for tonight, you didn't call it failure? What if this moment, curled in softness, was part of the unfolding? Even the stars repeat themselves. The moon forgets its shape. A man holds his head in his hands and mutters, "I was doing so well. I thought I was fixed." The person next to him says quietly, "You're not broken. You're blooming, just sideways today." Growth can feel like ruin when we expect it to be neat, but no story ever moved hearts in a straight line. The moments that define us are the messy ones, the ones we almost didn't survive, the ones that felt like the end, but gently, secretly, whispered us forward. Tonight, let go of the straight line. Let the circle be enough. Let the loop be your lesson. Let the pause be holy. You've never really gone back. You've only spiraled closer to the truth. And now, as we begin to drift into the next thought, let's spiral gently into the illusion of memory permanence. The unreliable narrator. The past isn't a silent witness, it's a storyteller, and not always an honest one. Every memory we carry has been revised by the invisible editors of our emotions. Trauma takes a moment and stretches it into a lifetime. Joy takes a single sparkle and floods the whole scene with golden light. Regret, that sharp whisper, redacts lines and rewrites endings that never really happened. This is the illusion of accuracy we cling to, that our memories are like untouched photographs, sealed in truth. But they're not. They're paintings, redrawn again and again with each recollection. The brush, dipped in how we felt, not what occurred. Do you remember it that way too? Honestly, I'm not sure anymore. Maybe I just remember how it made me feel. Two friends sit years after the storm they barely survived, piecing together a story neither of them can verify. And it's in that quiet confusion where something soft begins. Acceptance. Not of the facts, but of the distortion. Because if the mind bends the past, maybe it's also trying to protect you, or teach you, or help you move forward in the only way it knows how, through feeling. We chase closure, as if the past is a puzzle that will one day make sense. But what if healing isn't found in making the story clearer? What if it's in letting go of the need for it to ever be clear? The unreliability of memory doesn't mean we're broken. It means we're human. Our minds don't record, they interpret. And sometimes they soften. Sometimes they scream. But they always try to shape a narrative we can survive. So here's the question. If memory is malleable, then are you required to carry every version of the pain it once told? Or can you allow yourself to rewrite, not to lie, but to live? Let's now step beyond the personal and into the shared. Because even if memory is flawed, perhaps the real illusion lies in believing we all remember the same world. It's time to explore the illusion of synchronized minds. The collective sync. There are moments when your breath is not just yours, when a room inhales together, A crowd goes quiet before the first note. Or two strangers, without knowing it, step in rhythm down the same hallway. You didn't plan it. You couldn't have. But somehow, the timing clicked. Did you feel that? She asked, her voice half whisper, half wonder. He paused, looked up from the table, and replied softly, "Yeah, like we were thinking the same thing." There's no calendar for those collisions, no schedule where consciousness checks in and lines up neatly. And yet, there it is, in the hush of a vigil, the swell of a chant, the way the air inside a room thickens just before 1,000 hands rise to the sky. Science might call it neural entrainment, a sync-up of brainwaves and bodies in rhythm. But if you listen without trying to explain, it feels less like chemistry and more like memory, like something ancient stirred beneath the skin, like your heartbeat just remembered the drum it once danced to. You don't need to understand it to feel it. A teacher closes their book, and the students fall silent, not out of obedience, but out of gravity. A child watching fireworks suddenly turns to the stranger next to them, eyes wide, and they both gasp at the same time. A prayer whispered across tongues, cultures, faces, and yet it lands in the same center of the chest. And in those pauses between words, where no one speaks and yet everything is said, you start to wonder, is this real? Does everyone feel this too? Or have we just touched the part of reality that isn't made of parts? Because what if unity isn't something we achieve, but something we return to? Maybe the simulation forgets sometimes that it split us apart. Maybe these collective echoes, the shared laughs, gasps, silences, are the system's soft way of reminding us, you are not an island, you never were. And when your mind slows, and the breath deepens, and your thoughts start to fall in line with the pulse of the world around you, there's no need to hold on to time. Let it go. Let the ticking stop. Because the next segment won't need it. We are about to enter the final paradox. What happens when we let go of time altogether? Close your eyes gently. You're not alone in this stillness. You never were. The time-free mind. Time, for most of us, feels like a ruler pressed against our skin, marking inches of age, achievement, and decay. We learn to slice our lives into hours, days, deadlines. But inside the mind, time doesn't tick, it drifts. In dreams, 1 second might unfold into an eternity, and an entire childhood can flash by in the time it takes to blink. When we enter sleep, or silence, or stillness, something shifts. The body might lie in bed, but the mind floats beyond schedules and sunrise. Have you ever woken from a dream so vivid, you were convinced you'd lived an entire lifetime within it? A stranger's face etched in memory. A heartbreak you swore you'd endured for years. And yet, only 10 minutes had passed. That is the mind unshackled by time. When you stop measuring life by watches, calendars, or even age, you don't become lost. You become free. Do you remember what time it was in your dream last night? No idea. It just was. Exactly. No clocks, no pressure, just presence. And maybe that's what we're missing. We live like time is the master, racing it, fearing it, regretting it. But what if time is just a costume memory wears to play the role of continuity? Beneath that costume lies something more fluid, more honest, pure awareness. Without the tick of a clock, what surfaces isn't chaos, it's clarity. You begin to notice things not because they're scheduled, but because they simply are. A breeze on your skin, a distant bird's call, the echo of your own thought. Moments stop being measured and start being lived. If you stopped caring how long something took, Would it become more sacred? If you weren't obsessed with how much time is left, would your attention stretch wider, deeper, warmer? The illusion of time may be practical, but it can also be a prison. Letting go, even briefly, doesn't erase reality. It reveals it. Now take a breath, not a quick one, a breath that ignores the clock. Let it linger, let it stretch, and as it does, allow yourself to enter a softer realm, where time doesn't just pause. It never mattered to begin with. And now, gently, let's go deeper, into a stranger illusion still. The illusion not just of time paused, but time invented. The fabrication of time. There are nights when you swear the clock moved backward, and mornings that feel like they never arrived. What if time isn't ticking? What if it's telling? A story whispered so well that you mistake the plot for reality? Think about how a dream folds time like laundry, twisting yesterday into tomorrow, layering memories that never happened. A stranger turns to you in line and says, "Didn't we already talk about this?" And you pause, not sure whether it was a dream or déjà vu or something else entirely. Simulations, digital or psychological, don't need a clock. They only need sequence, a beginning, middle, and end, even if the beginning was never born. That's the trick, the illusion. That time is a line, a chain of events you're bound to. But maybe it's more like a page, already printed, already flipped, and you're just reading your part out loud. A couple sits on a bench under flickering streetlight. She looks up and asks softly, "Do you ever feel like we've done this before?" He answers with a half laugh, "Maybe we're just catching up to a moment that already knew us." If entire years can be fabricated through trauma, stories, rehearsed memories, then how can you swear which part of your life was real? Maybe the parts you forgot held more truth than the ones you retell. Some things feel like time, but they aren't. The way a kiss lingers, the way guilt rewinds, the way hope speeds everything forward. They shape you more than any calendar ever could. What if your entire life is less a river flowing and more a play being performed, again and again, with rehearsed lines, borrowed emotions, and an audience you'll never meet? And the quietest moments, when you stop performing, those are the ones where truth waits. You're not late, you're not early, you're simply here, in the part of the story where you remember how stories are made. And when the curtain falls, maybe time folds you back into silence. Now, let's step deeper into the most sacred illusion of all. Not time paused, not time written, but time made holy. Sacred time. There are moments that do not ask for your attention. They claim it. A baby's first breath, not yet touched by language, echoing in a quiet room like the first note of a sacred hymn. The final goodbye, where no words can carry the weight of what's leaving. Or a soft rain in the middle of a silent afternoon, as if the sky itself is whispering apologies no one asked for but everyone needs. These aren't just moments in time. They are ruptures in it. Time doesn't pass here. It pauses, kneels, and holds its breath. We call them sacred, not because of their duration, but because of how they feel like they've always existed. Outside the calendar, outside the ticking second hand, they are invitations into stillness, into a kind of silence that's not empty, but full, like a cathedral filled not with noise, but with meaning. You could sit in that stillness for hours and not count a single one, because in sacred time, measurement fails. It doesn't matter whether something lasted for a second or a season. It mattered because it mattered. And when something matters deeply enough, It folds time inward until only presence remains. Do you remember the first time we held hands in the rain? I do. I don't know what time it was, but I remember how it felt. Like the world was pausing just for us. Maybe it was. Sacred time isn't scheduled. It doesn't live on clocks or digital screens. It arrives when the ordinary falls away and something ancient, tender, or unexplainable enters the room. You don't make these moments. They reveal themselves when you're quiet enough to notice, when you aren't trying to rush to the next thing, but are simply here, heart open, eyes soft, soul still. And maybe that's the secret. Stillness isn't the absence of action. It's the presence of reverence, a reverence for the breath that trembles, the goodbye that lingers, the moment that doesn't ask for more, because it already is more. Now, as we leave behind the quiet awe of sacred time, let us drift further, into the surreal, where time doesn't just pause, it collapses, where memories stretch, futures bend, and the boundaries of reality melt into dream. The temporal intersection. There are nights when the air feels strangely familiar, when a breeze brushes your skin just like it did when you were small, running barefoot under a storm-lit sky. But you're not there, are you? You're here. And yet, something within you reacts as if the years between never happened. Two people sit across from each other in a quiet train. One looks out the window and says, "Isn't it strange how a scent can take you somewhere before your mind even catches up?" The other nods, watching the reflection of the past flicker through their own eyes. In moments of grief or great joy, time doesn't move in a straight line. It folds. One memory seeps into the present like ink on wet paper. And suddenly, you are 5 and 35 at the same time. You are hearing their voice again, but they aren't here. Still, it feels real, maybe even more real than now. What if your mind is not a single thread but a woven fabric, past, present, even glimpses of a future not yet named? Some call it trauma. Others call it intuition. But what if both are simply timelines trying to touch? You pause on the staircase, heart racing for no reason. Or someone says your name, and you turn before they speak. How did you know? Was it memory? Or a life already lived in silence? A woman hums a tune she doesn't remember learning. A man opens a door and swears he's seen this hallway before. Not in this life, perhaps, but in some corner of their internal clockwork where time no longer obeys its own laws. So maybe, just maybe, you aren't confined to one sequence. Maybe your mind is a room with layered windows. One opens to childhood, another to now, another still to a moment that hasn't happened yet, but already aches like a memory. If that's true, then who are you really? The child, the elder, the witness? There is no need to answer, only to rest in the wonder. And now, gently, we come to the final illusion, the one that releases the grasp, the thought that lets go. The thought that lets go. What if the path to peace wasn't through more effort, more understanding, or even more insight, but through surrender? Not surrender to chaos or failure, but to stillness. Imagine this. You've spent your whole life thinking your way toward safety, problem solving, planning, worrying, like mental scaffolding, holding up a house you were never supposed to live in forever. But what if the real safety comes when you stop holding on? Between one thought and the next, there's a pause. A silence so subtle you may have missed it your whole life. In that pause, there is no name, no past, no future. Just breathe, just awareness. It doesn't announce itself or ask for attention. It's the quiet witness, what's left when everything else is released. And for the first time, you're not trying to fix anything. You're not running, not achieving, not even searching. You're simply here. Two friends might speak in the dark just before falling asleep. Hey, you ever feel like your thoughts are the only thing keeping you awake? Yeah, but lately, I wonder what would happen if I just stopped chasing them. What happens when you stop chasing thought isn't nothingness, it's clarity. Not the kind that explains everything, but the kind that makes explaining unnecessary. The illusion has always been that thinking is the ladder out of the storm. But maybe, just maybe, the storm ends when you stop climbing. Let yourself be nothing for a while. Not a role, not a goal, not even a name. Just the quiet space that welcomes whatever comes. That space isn't the absence of you, it's the essence of you, no longer tangled in trying to be. And now, let go. Let every illusion soften and dissolve. You are not broken. You are not late. You are not lost. You are safe. You are whole. And sleep is just another doorway back to yourself, the part of you that never needed to hold on at all. And now, after 100 steps through the strange corridors of your own psychology, what do you feel? Are you more you or less? Perhaps the biggest illusion wasn't any of the tricks we named, but the idea that the mind must always be understood to be at peace. What if the truth is gentler? That you don't need to outthink your mind, only outbreathe it. So as this journey fades into silence and your thoughts soften into dreamlike shapes, remember, you are not broken. You are not lost. You are simply unfolding. And sometimes the most powerful illusion is that you ever had to fix yourself at all. Good night, wanderer of the inner world. Let the illusions keep spinning without you.